Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Allen Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. He grew up in a deeply religious family. As a student at Princeton High School, David was actively involved in several extracurricular activities, including the Bible Club, chess club, science club, and a cappella chorus. After graduating from high school, he attended Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia, where he studied electrical engineering. Notably, David demonstrated exceptional skills in computer engineering, which eventually led him to secure employment at prominent defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Anna Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She was the oldest of 6 children to parents Phyllis and Wayne Robinette. Her father was a preacher and her mother worked at Walmart and singing in their church choir. However, Louise's childhood was extremely painful. Her parents often argued, which resulted in them treating their 6 children very poorly. Louise, her younger sisters, and her mother were sexually abused as children by a family member, a traumatic experience. This dark family secret was hidden for years but was later revealed by Louise's younger sisters. Despite facing their own distress, Louise was protective by shielding her younger siblings from their abuser and comforting them during their parents' intense conflicts. Her younger sister Elizabeth described her as gentle, compassionate, and caring, always working to comfort them during this difficult time. When Louise was 15 years old, she met 22-year-old David Turpin at church, and then they started dating each other. Since they feared Louise's parents might not approve, they decided to keep their relationship private. After her mother, Phyllis, found out about the relationship, she initially had concerns but eventually accepted David and Louise's bond. This was partly because David came from a Christian family and partly due to Louise's reassurances. However, they still keep this relationship a secret from Louise's father, Wayne, as they were aware that he might be very upset if he found out. 5 years after graduating from Princeton High School, 23-year-old David visited the school where Louise was a student. He managed to convince the school staff to let him take Louise out of class. Louise willingly left with David, and they set off on a journey south to get married in secret. Their plan was to elope without telling anyone. When Louise's parents found out she was missing, they contacted the authorities. However, before the authorities can catch up with them, the couple had already reached Texas, where they intended to get married without anyone knowing. Surprisingly, David and Louise agreed to return to West Virginia without resistance. When they arrived, they thought that Wayne and Phyllis would be angry, but instead, they received a calm reaction. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter to be in a relationship with David, but he eventually understood that he couldn't separate 2 people in love. Wayne eventually gave in and consented to their marriage. The couple got married in a simple ceremony in Petersburg, Virginia, on February 11, 1985. 2 years later, Wayne and Phyllis got divorced, and Wayne started working as the chief deputy assessor in Mercia County. After her marriage, Louise began to drift away from her family. Free from her parents' rules, she was happy to start her own independent life. In 1988, Louise and her family welcomed their first child, a daughter. 18 months later, in 1990, they had another child. When David got a job transfer with General Dynamics, the family moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and settled in the modern neighborhood of Meadow Creek. With David's high-paying job, the Turpins enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle. To show off their new wealth, Louise invited her family from West Virginia to visit. Since she grew up without much money, Louise wanted to share her new success with her family. David and Louise kindly paid for their family's travel and accommodation expenses during the visit. In 1991, the Turpin family had a son, bringing them more joy. However, the family struggled with significant debt by 1992, despite David's high income. Instead of cutting back on spending, they continue to live a lavish lifestyle and continue to have more children. In 1993, Louise got pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. Every year, Louise's family visited the Turpins, but they didn't know the Turpins were struggling financially. To keep up appearances, Louise took care of all expenses during her family's visits, hiding their financial problems. In 1994, the Turpin family's eldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary. Her greasy and messy hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene suggested that she was being neglected by her parents. As a result, her classmates teased her and made fun of her for being dirty. The following year, 1995, the Turpin family had one more son. In 1996, they took a family trip to visit Louise's relatives. At the time, the Turpins were struggling financially, but they didn't seem to worry about it and continued to spend a lot of money, taking their relatives out to expensive meals. In the summer of 1996, Elizabeth, Louise's sister, traveled with the Turpin family to their home in Fort Worth for the holidays. During the trip, the family stopped at a casino in Louisiana, where Louise and David left Elizabeth in charge of the children while they gambled. Louise asked Elizabeth to keep their activities a secret. However, Louise's gamble was in direct conflict with her Christian upbringing, which taught her that gambling was morally wrong. Unfortunately, their gamble ended in losses, which led to a fierce argument between David and Louise. David believed Louise had a gambling problem and blamed her for their financial struggles. During her stay with the Turpin family, Elizabeth witnessed the family's disturbing dynamics firsthand. David and Louise showed little affection towards their children and controlled nearly every aspect of their lives. Simple tasks like using the restroom or eating required permission from David and Louise. Moreover, Elizabeth found David's behavior especially unsettling. He regularly entered the bathroom while she was showering, watching her and making her feeling discomfort and uncomfortable. The Turpin family's problems started to worsen in 1997. In May of that year, they had another child. However, in September, concerns about her oldest daughter's health began to emerge. She was dirty and showed signs of possible sexual abuse. As a result, she was taken to the principal's office to talk about her home life. Unfortunately, no action was taken to address her situation. The family had another child in 1998, increasing their number to 6. Despite David's high-paying job, the family fell deeply into debt due to their frequent gambling. This led to significant financial difficulties. In 1999, the eldest daughter stopped attending school, followed by the other children. The parents claimed they were homeschooling, but this was not true. The bank foreclosed on the family's Fort Worth home in 1998, forcing the Turpins to move to a less populated area in Rio Vista, Texas. However, the new house was kept in a disgusting state. The owners who moved in after the Turpins reported finding dirt stains and a foul smell, suggesting the presence of feces. Before moving to the Rio Vista house, the family had their 7th child. Between 2001 and 2007, the Turpin family had 5 more children, bringing the total to 13. As time went on, the parents' neglect turned into physical abuse. They would hit, slap, choke, and whip their children for minor reasons such as using the bathroom without permission. Shockingly, the children were only allowed to bathe once a year. The children were also malnourished. David and Louise bought delicious food, but they know to let their children eat it. Instead, they made their kids watch as they left the food untouched, leaving the children to suffer from hunger. This was a heartbreaking and inhumane situation that would have a profound impact on the children's lives. The children were severely malnourished due to being fed cheap frozen meals, leading to stunted physical growth and pale complexions that made them appear younger than their actual age. Additionally, the lack of social interaction and emotional abuse significantly impacted their mental development. In 2004, the Turpin family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their previous home in Rio Vista. This decision was made because their old house had become uninhabitable due to the overwhelming amount of trash and dead rodents. In 2008, Louise had a conversation with her younger sister Teresa that left her stunned. Louise, 40, revealed that she and her husband David no longer attended church, a huge change from their family's strict Christian upbringing. Instead, David and Louise became interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that them was involved in swinging, which meant they had sex with other couples they met online. What's more, they would often leave their younger children at home with their older siblings while they met strangers online. It became clear that Louise was the primary participant in these activities, with David acting as her accomplice by providing transportation and waiting for her during the encounters. This big change in her sister, Louise, from a caring and responsible person to someone almost unrecognizable, was deeply disturbing to Teresa. Meanwhile, the Turpin family moved to Marietta and made frequent visits to Disneyland, where they took many happy photos in matching outfits. Louise sent these photos to her family, with whom she had limited contact through Skype, and kept the children isolated from them. The photos reassured Louise's family that the children seemed to be in good spirits, despite appearing underweight. David and Louise had a strong fascination with Disneyland. This is evident from that they have come here many times. And they have recorded these experiences through photographs. In 2014, the family relocated to Peru, California, about 20 miles north of Paris, previously mentioned as Marietta. By this point, the abuse and violence against the children had become to extreme levels. David and Louise restrained the children to their beds using ropes, and if they tried to escape, they would replace the ropes with chains and padlocks. The children were forced to spend around 20 hours a day locked in their room, surrounded by a foul smell that filled the air. In 2015, the family had their 13th and final child. The family took a trip to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. They chose to renew their vows at the Elvis Chapel, which was a stark contrast to the abuse the children suffered at home. One of their children, 17 years old, found the courage to escape through a window and call the police to report the abuse. During the 20-minute 911 call, the girl described the terrible living conditions and the many abuses she and her siblings endured. She had photographic evidence and waited for the police to arrive. When they got there, they found a malnourished girl who looked much younger than her age. The girl gave the police pictures of the inside of the house. The police discovered the dark secrets the family had kept hidden. When police officers entered the house, they were immediately hit with a strong, foul smell that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the overpowering odor, they continued their search and were shocked by what they found. 3 of the younger children were chained to their beds. The house was extremely dirty and filled with trash, and the children did not have access to basic necessities like bathrooms. The police quickly took the younger children to the Riverside University Medical Center for care, while the older children were taken to the Corona Regional Medical Center for evaluation and treatment. On January 14, 2018, the authorities arrested David and Louise Turpin, accusing them of child abuse and torture. 4 days later, the couple was formally charged with multiple crimes, including 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abusing a dependent adult, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment, with these charges applied to both David and Louise equally. Also faced a separate charge for engaging in a lewd act with a minor under the age of 14. Notably, among the Turpin children, the 2-year-old was unique in showing no apparent signs of abuse or torture. The Turpin children suffered severe physical and emotional abuse. The parents physically harmed them, including throwing them down the stairs, which resulted in nerve damage. The children lacked basic knowledge about life, further highlights the neglect they suffered. Although the parents bought toys for them, they were not allowed to play with these toys. The children's sleep was also severely restricted. They had to stay awake late into the night, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not permitted to go to bed before then. On January 24, 2018, the judge ordered David and Louise to have no direct contact with their children for 3 years. Any communication would have to be through their lawyers. A few months later, on June 21, 2018, the court decided there was enough evidence to put David and Louise on trial. Finally, on February 22, 2019, David and Louise changed their pleas, both pleading guilty to a total of 14 charges, including torture, abuse of dependent adults, false imprisonment, and dangerous for children. In a surprising turn of events, the court proceedings brought about an emotional reunion between the parents and their children. According to the children's statements, they had forgiven their parents and still loved them. Each child expressed concern for their parents' well-being and shared that they were doing well in their new lives. David and Louise, overcome with emotion, apologized sincerely for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success and happiness. David and Louise was given a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of March 2022, Louise, who is 53 years old, and David, who is 60 years old, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in the Turpin household shocked the community and left many questioning why it went undetected for so long. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jesse Bardwell. Jesse Bardwell was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, to loving parents Gary and Carla Bardwell. She had an older brother named Brandon. The siblings had a close relationship, with Brandon often protecting Jesse from bullies. Their childhood was filled with joy and love, thanks in part to frequent visits from their grandma Kitty, who adored her grandchildren. She would read to them, share stories, and invent games, creating a warm and nurturing environment. The Bardwell family embodied the quintessential American family spirit. Jessie was a kind, cheerful, and stylish girl who dreamed of a career in the beauty industry and one day opening her own salon. However, when Jessie was 14, her parents divorced, disrupting the family's harmony. She chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. As a firefighter, Gary's job could be unpredictable, and Jessie would often call to check on him. Gary eventually married again, this time to Gina. Jessie developed a good relationship with her new stepmother. Gina proved to be an excellent homemaker, providing care and support to the entire family. Jessie was relieved to see her father happy with his partner, which made her feel secure about leaving home in the future. After completing her education, Jessie moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, to start her independent life. She worked as a waitress at Cobalt, a popular beachfront restaurant, to support herself. Her father, Gary, recalled how Jessie loved being near the water as it brought her peace. Despite the distance, they remained close, frequently exchanging messages and spending quality time together, such as going boating and fishing, whenever he visited. Kimberly Embry, the restaurant manager and Jessie's friend, discovered that Jessie's father was a skilled musician. After retiring, he dedicated more time to his craft, leading to frequent performances at the restaurant, where he even had his own table. Kimberly admired the close bond between Jessie and her father, describing them as true friends. Jessie always attended her father's performances, and the tips she earned helped fund her college education and pursue her dreams. At work, Jessie met a young man named Terry Ellis, who was also a waiter. They began dating and developed a steady and serious relationship, appearing to be a harmonious couple. However, at a social event, Jessie met Jason Lowe, a friend of Terry's, and was immediately smitten. Her sudden infatuation surprised everyone, and she fell deeply in love with Jason, becoming oblivious to her surroundings. Jessie and Terry parted ways amicably. Jessie opened up to him about her newfound feelings. This decision turned her life upside down, but she was drawn to Jason's charming and promising nature. He was handsome, held 2 degrees, and had a decent job. Jason was polite and knew how to present himself well. For Jessie, her new feelings marked the beginning of a new life. When Jason learned about her dreams, he promised to fulfill them. As he needed to relocate to Dallas, Texas, for a high-paying job in the technology industry, Jessie decided to follow him. Jessie viewed the move as an adventure, rather than a life-changing decision. Although she was hesitant to leave her father, Gary, for an extended period, her ambition and youthful idealism ultimately prevailed. She kept her plans a secret from her father, fearing his disappointment and knowing he would be opposed to her decision. As a result, she didn't inform him of her plans, even when they spent their last Christmas together. Mr. Bardwell didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about his daughter Jessie's behavior initially. She seemed happy, laughing and joking as usual. Jessie, 24, had moved to Richardson, a suburb of Dallas, with her boyfriend Jason. While Jason worked from home, Jessie was looking for a new job and scouting locations for her own salon. They had plans to get married and buy a house. However, Jessie's relationship with her father began to change drastically. They grew apart, and Jessie stopped answering her father's calls, which troubled Mr. Bardwell. It wasn't until speaking with Kimberly that Mr. Bardwell learned of Jessie's new boyfriend and her move out of state. He tried to reconnect with Jessie, but Jason controlled her communications. Mr. Bardwell's suspicions about Jason grew after meeting him when they visited Pascagoula. The father attempted to dissuade his daughter, Jessie, from returning to Texas, but she was resolute. When Gary inquired about her well-being, Jessie hugged him tightly, insisting everything was fine and expressing her desire to make her family proud. However, her father couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. He even wrote a song, "Taken," in her honor. For months after Jessie moved to Texas, she ceased responding to phone calls. The final warning sign came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a cherished family tradition. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong and contacted Jason, Jessie's boyfriend. Jason claimed ignorance of Jessie's whereabouts, citing their supposedly open relationship, which allowed her to come and go as she pleased. However, Gary knew this was a lie, aware that Jason was a jealous and controlling partner who contradicted himself. The next morning, Jessie's father headed to Texas, convinced that her boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. During his journey, he sent the boyfriend a message warning him that if Jessie wasn't home when he arrived, there would be serious consequences. When he arrived at their apartment, he found no sign of Jessie or her belongings. Despite this, the boyfriend claimed he had no idea where she was and was waiting for her to return. Later, Kimberly shared some information that Jessie had confided in her during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. It turned out that Jason had been spending money on banned substances and entertainment, and his promises to fulfill Jessie's dreams had largely evaporated. The boyfriend had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, and this was also reflected in how he treated Jessie. While their relationship appeared fine in public, Jason was often rude and aggressive in private, leading to frequent conflicts. With Jessie missing, her father filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. The investigation was led by Detective Hiram Hale, a father of 3 daughters who was determined to uncover the truth. The police took immediate action, speaking with the boyfriend several times and searching the house, but they found no sign of Jessie. During the conversation, the young man, Jason, mentioned that he last saw Jessie on May 8 around 10 a.m. She left without explanation, and he thought she might be visiting her parents. He claimed that she drove away in her Acura car. Jason maintained that their relationship was casual and that he didn't control her or pry into her personal life. However, investigators discovered information that contradicted his statements. They found out that Jessie had sold her Acura car 3 weeks earlier, and Jason was present at the sale. This new information raised suspicions, and investigators questioned Jason again on May 12. When searching his home, police found a plate with a powder substance in the kitchen, which turned out to be cocaine. The investigation then shifted to Jason's garage and the vehicle inside. At first, Jason was unwilling to permit the search, stating that he shared the garage with others and therefore required their consent. However, he eventually dropped his objections. Upon entering the garage, officers noticed a mud-splattered Audi with a detached bumper. They suspected that Jessie's body might be inside the car. Although the vehicle was empty, the smell of decomposition was stronger inside. Police found the broken bumper and what appeared to be blood stains in the trunk. When experts applied a luminol-based substance to the cargo area, it illuminated with a blue light, indicating the presence of blood, likely belonging to the missing woman. Jason claimed he became stuck in the mud while searching for his girlfriend after the car's bumper caught on a bush. Despite this, he maintained that he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. However, he was unable to explain the presence of blood in the car or the controlled substances found in his home. Experts determined that the amount of blood in the trunk suggested that she was likely deceased. As a result, the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation. To prevent the main suspect from fleeing, Jason was detained on charges related to the narcotics found in his home. During interrogation, Jason continued to stick to his story. When shown a photo of his loved one, he refused to provide any explanations, gazing at the picture without emotion and suggesting that he was being framed for a crime he did not commit. Eventually, the suspect was charged with homicide, even though Jessie's body had not been found. The search for her continued, but it was a difficult and time-consuming process in the vast state of Texas, with its many rivers, lakes, fields, and forests, where a body could easily be hidden. 1 year later, Jason was in a Texas jail, still cooperating with the investigation. He revealed 2 key details about the case. Firstly, he claimed Jessie's death was an accident and planned to reveal more in court, hoping the jury would be understanding. This makes it difficult for prosecutors to build a case. Andy Farkas, Jason's defense attorney, is very happy about this. Farkas conducted a mock trial with a panel of outsiders acting as jurors, using the available evidence and Jason's confession. However, the mock trial ended in a not guilty verdict, with 15 out of the mock jurors voting to acquit. Farkas hoped that a real court would also deliver a not guilty verdict if they knew the truth. It was later revealed that Jason himself had provided the anonymous tip about the location of the victim's body, which became another piece of evidence in the investigation. The prosecution proposed a deal to reduce the sentence by half if Jason revealed Jessie's location. After discussing it with his lawyer, Jason agreed, on the condition that the source of the information would remain secret until the trial. The authorities wanted to find Jessie's body so her family could give her a proper burial and say their goodbyes. As time passed, Jessie's father, Gary, became consumed by grief and anger, longing for justice to be served. On May 19th, when Jessie's body was finally discovered, her loved ones were able to mourn her and say goodbye. However, when Gary received the autopsy report, he was shocked and appalled by the state of his daughter's body. She had been wrapped in a sheet and was barely recognizable as a human being, having been discarded like trash. Gary arranged for his daughter's body to be returned to her hometown with the help of his friends and former colleagues, who hired a funeral hearse to transport her. Jessie's family, friends, and acquaintances held a memorial service for her on the beach, where they prayed for her to be found and for justice for her suffering. About 1,000 people attended a memorial service at the First United Methodist Church to honor the victim. The victim's grandmother, Kitty Bardwell, spoke emotionally, saying that if the town could be cleansed by the tears shed for her granddaughter, it would be truly clean. The tragedy drew widespread attention, with many offering condolences to the family and coming forward to support them. Gary found a unique way to cope with his emotions. Gary printed a photo of Jason, attached it to a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer. This unusual form of therapy brought him some small sense of relief. However, Gary continued to struggle, often finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning. He held on to the hope that Jason would be tried and convicted for murdering his daughter. Gary blamed himself for not doing more to protect Jessie, wishing he had convinced her to leave Jason or at least break up with him. Gary remembered a phone call from Jessie, where she admitted he was right about Jason after they had argued and he had kicked her out. She had found temporary shelter with a friend but returned to Jason the next day, giving him another chance. Gary had no choice but to accept his daughter's decision, a choice that would later fill him with regret. When the trial finally began, Gary traveled to Texas, determined to see Jason punished for his crime. Prosecutor Cynthia Walker started her opening statement by describing Jason's personality. Many people saw him as complex and difficult to get along with, and he had few friends because of his long history of substance abuse, which often led to uncontrollable outbursts of anger. It's possible that Jessie was a victim of one of these outbursts. Prosecutor Westwin called some of Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They supported the prosecution's claims about Jason's aggressive behavior, saying they had feared for their lives because of his violent jealousy. Like Jessie, they had been isolated from their friends and family by Jason, who showed clear signs of being manipulative and a pathological liar. In contrast, Jason presented himself as superior to other men, successfully deceiving people. Jason responded quickly to these revelations in court. He said he had started using substances at age 13, influenced by his friends, and had become addicted. Jason Lowe tried to keep his life on track, earning multiple degrees and working for a prestigious global company. He claimed his actions were motivated by a desire to fulfill Jessie's dreams and build a life together out of love. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason. They suggested that his behavior was inconsistent with someone grieving the loss of a loved one. The investigation found that Jessie's death occurred between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day of a reported argument with Jason that the neighbors, the Jordans, witnessed. After Jessie's death, Jason moved her body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it remained for several days. The blood found in the car was confirmed to be Jessie's. Jason later moved her body to a remote farm, hiding it in the nearby woods. The sheet wrapping Jessie's body was identified as part of Jason's bedding set, which was still in use at his home even after her death. Meanwhile, Jason continued to see other women, exchanging messages and intimate photos with them before meeting at his apartment. Jason tried to cope with his emotions by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. However, his attempt to distract himself was disrupted when detectives discovered his involvement in Jessie's death through a clever tactic. They asked Tommy Jordan, someone Jason knew, to talk to him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason admitted to making a mistake and feeling guilty about an accident that happened with Jessie, which he attributed to his own negligence. Jason's admission was seen as a confession, and he eventually told the prosecution where Jessie's body was located. At the trial, Jason shared his account of what happened on the night of Jessie's death. He explained that they had taken pills that increased their libido and were intimate in the shower. Jason slipped and fell, followed by Jessie, who hit her head on the bathtub. She then sat down, feeling hot and dizzy, and Jason claimed he offered to call for medical help, but Jessie refused, thinking that rest and sleep would be enough. Jason found Jessie unresponsive and not breathing on his chest the next morning. Despite trying to revive her, she was dead. Afraid of being accused of murder, Jason didn't call the police and instead decided to handle the situation himself. He initially left Jesse's body in his car, but later moved it to a remote farm where he carelessly discarded her in a trash pile without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was questionable due to his questionable character and the results of the forensic medical examination. The examination revealed that Jesse had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have been caused by slaps to the face, suggesting that Jason had tried to cover up evidence of a violent beating. As a result, Jason's entire story was discredited. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found him guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason to 50 years in prison. Jason's original sentence could have been up to 99 years, but it was reduced due to a deal with the prosecution. As a result, Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. Gary felt a sense of relief when the verdict was announced, feeling that justice had been served. However, he noticed that Jason showed no remorse for his actions. Interestingly, Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the trial, with Chambers commenting that if she could give one piece of advice to others in similar situations, it would be to get away as soon as possible. Jason continues to claim that the death was an accident and maintains his innocence to this day. Sadly, Jason's girlfriend, Jessie, had already paid the ultimate price. Jessie grew up with a positive example of male behavior, courtesy of her father Gary, but tragically discovered Jason's darker side too late. This experience serves as a warning that some men can be deceiving, manipulative, hiding behind a charming exterior. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan, born in 1987 in Nanjing, China, a major city and former capital, Wang Nan grew up in a relatively affluent family. Her parents provided her with the best possible education and encouraged her to develop her talents. After completing her secondary education, Wang Nan enrolled in a prestigious university where she studied business and finance and also learned several foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency where she quickly proved herself to be a valuable, responsible, and motivated employee. Her career advanced rapidly, and she was soon sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Wang Nan worked as a top manager for several years before deciding to leave the agency to start her own business. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which she managed successfully, and it eventually grew into a small but popular chain. Wang Nan was a thriving young entrepreneur who had devoted her life to her career. With her constant business engagements, she barely had time for socializing or dating, and her loneliness became a normal part of her life. At almost 30 years old, Wang Nan was well established in Thailand, having lived there for a while and become proficient in the language. However, she strived for further improvement, taking additional courses to learn Thai at a training center. There, she met a young man named Yu Xiaodong, who initially stared at her before introducing himself in his native language. They exchanged brief conversations, and he inquired about her reason for studying the language. Wang Nan replied that it was for business purposes, and Yu Xiaodong proposed exchanging business cards to potentially meet up Sunday. Although Wang Nan was not interested in continuing the conversation, she still politely gave him her business card. Yu Xiaodong also gave Wang Nan his own business card, which said that he worked in the import-export industry in Bangkok. Not very impressed, Wang Nan put the business card in her wallet and forgot about it. Yu Xiaodong was the only one who showed genuine interest in Wang Nan, and he wasted no time in calling her the very next day. However, she was preoccupied with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes to talk, so she declined his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, Yu Xiaodong asked her out again, but Wang Nan turned him down once more, citing her busy schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she hoped to expand her professional network. Undeterred, Yu Xiaodong showed up at the conference with a stunning bouquet of flowers and waited for Wang Nan to become available. When she was free, he approached her and asked her out once more. This time, Wang Nan was charmed by his persistence, which was a new experience for her. No one had ever pursued her so relentlessly before, so she agreed to meet him for dinner. As it turned out, Yu Xiaodong's interest in Wang Nan was more than just a passing infatuation. He was completely smitten. He showered her with attention, surprise gifts, and romantic gestures, including sending flowers to her doorstep every morning with sweet notes attached. He also called her at least twice a day to wish her good morning and good night. Wang Nan had mixed emotions about the situation. While she was irritated by Yu Xiaodong's all-consuming infatuation, she was also flattered that someone was making such an effort to win her heart. As a result, she found herself unexpectedly entering into a romantic relationship. Yu Xiaodong went out of his way to woo her, not only romantically but also by trying to be perfect in every aspect of their relationship. He shared her interests and opinions, learned to cook her favorite meals, and planned exciting activities for them to enjoy together. He was also eager to help her with her work and household chores at a moment's notice. Wang Nan was over the moon with happiness, feeling as though she was living in a fairy tale. Yu Xiaodong's behavior, however, was moving at a breakneck pace. Despite having only been together for a few months, he was already making plans for their wedding and discussing potential names for their future children. This made Wang Nan uncomfortable, but Yu Xiaodong would counter by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and that it was time for them to start thinking about building a family. That night, Yu Xiaodong wrote a heartfelt letter to Wang Nan, expressing his deep affection and commitment to being a good husband and father. The next morning, he arrived at her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, reiterating his seriousness about marrying her. Wang Nan jokingly mentioned that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half, but Yu Xiaodong suggested they go there immediately. To her surprise, the courthouse was open, and the officer responsible for registering marriages was already at his desk, ready to formalize their union. Yu Xiaodong had secretly arranged for a hasty marriage ceremony to take place early in the morning. The whole event was unusual and lacking in formality. There were no guests, no exchange of rings, no wedding dress or veil, and no commemorative photographs. Wang Nan couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing wasn't really happening, especially since she hadn't even introduced her new husband to her mother, with whom she was extremely close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate in her hand, and her newlywed husband was standing beside her, beaming with satisfaction. Wang Nan's marriage was troubled from the start. She had second thoughts about marrying Yu Xiaodong almost immediately after the wedding. Initially, she had hoped he would be a reliable partner, a man she could depend on. Unfortunately, her expectations were not met, and her new husband's true nature soon revealed itself. Yu Xiaodong spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money without contributing to their household expenses. Whenever his wife asked him why he wasn't working, he claimed his business was slow due to seasonal fluctuations and that he was just taking a break. However, her suspicions grew as time passed, and she decided to investigate his business. Her findings shocked her. His supposedly successful import-export company existed only on paper and business cards. Wang Nan was horrified, realizing too late that she should have had a prenuptial agreement. Now, her husband could freely spend her earnings, and if they divorced, he would claim her assets. During a tense conversation, Yu Xiaodong broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find a good job. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for work and was content to rely on his wife's support. Yu Xiaodong, a grown man, consistently acted like a child. He spent most of his time playing computer games and expected his wife, Wang Nan, to pay for his personal expenses whenever he helped out around the house or assisted her at the restaurant. Wang Nan eventually had enough and told him she would no longer give him money unless he got a job. The next day, Yu Xiaodong disappeared, taking their marriage certificate and Wang Nan's identity card with him. Wang Nan only discovered the missing documents that evening when her accountant called to inquire about a large transfer of funds from her account. She was shocked, as she had not authorized the transfer. However, she immediately suspected her husband's involvement. It turned out that Yu Xiaodong had transferred more than $500,000 into his own account, using the stolen documents to deceive the bank into thinking it was their joint decision to transfer their shared money. Wang Nan quickly reported the theft to the police, who tracked down Yu Xiaodong a few hours later as he attempted to withdraw some of the stolen money. Confronted by the police and his wife, Xiaodong broke down and begged for forgiveness on his knees. He confessed to losing a large sum of money through gambling, which had led to threats of death and demands to repay the debt. This was not his first brush with the law, as he had previously served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in his home country of China. Wang Nan was consumed by shame as she learned the truth about her husband's past. Despite this, she believed that his addiction to gambling was a disease that could be overcome, and she wanted to help him recover and return to a normal life. To support him, Wang Nan agreed to pay off half of his debt and offered him a job as Hickey of one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu Xiaodong appeared to be grateful for the opportunity and took his new role seriously. He even developed a promising strategy for the restaurant's growth. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. Before long, he began to spend more time playing computer games and indulging in other leisure activities. Meanwhile, Wang Nan discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with her husband. Yu Xiaodong initially expressed reservations about the pregnancy, and in a moment of hesitation, asked his wife to consider an abortion, which she flatly refused. The disagreement escalated to the point where he threatened divorce and division of their property, but eventually, his demeanor softened, and he apologized for his rash words. Yu Xiaodong later admitted that his outburst was driven by emotional anxiety, but ultimately, he was happy about the impending arrival of their child. However, things took a dramatic turn 2 months later. During a fateful trip, Yu Xiaodong suggested that his wife purchase life insurance, citing the pregnancy as a reason to safeguard her well-being and that of their unborn child in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. This seemingly caring gesture came after a period of harmony in their marriage, where he had been attentive, supportive, and diligent in his role as a husband and expectant father. Wang Nan quickly agreed to her husband's suggestion and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it herself. They purchased insurance the very next day. A couple of weeks later, Yu Xiaodong proposed a vacation to help them relax and unwind. Wang Nan was initially hesitant, but her husband was insistent. He pointed out that they had never had a honeymoon and that traveling with a baby would be difficult in the coming years. He also felt that they needed a break to clear their minds of the stress and negativity they had been experiencing. Wang Nan was eventually won over by her husband's arguments and agreed to the trip. He took charge of planning the entire vacation, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities that would be enjoyable and educational, yet not too strenuous for Wang Nan's pregnant state. Wang Nan was happy to leave the planning to her husband and was pleased to see how much effort he was putting into making their vacation special. On June 7th, they visited the park for the first time and spent most of the day exploring its many beautiful sights and lookouts. However, as the summer evening wore on, the park became increasingly crowded, with tourists everywhere. As the sun began to set, Wang Nan noticed that her husband, Yu Xiaodong, was growing angry and nervous. When she asked him what was wrong, he explained that the crowds were ruining their chance to enjoy a romantic sunset in peace. Despite his initial frustration, Yu Xiaodong tried to make the most of the situation, suggesting that they could still have a romantic moment as the sun set. As the park began to clear out, he climbed the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, Wan Nan, to join him, promising her an incredible view. However, Wang declined, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu Xiaodong became angry but eventually returned to his wife, suggesting that they should come back to the park another time to watch the sunrise together. The Wang Nan and Yu Xiaodong returned to their hotel late on Saturday night, so they decided to sleep in and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. As planned, they woke up at 3 a.m. on June 9th and left for the national park while it was still dark outside. Their goal was to catch the first rays of the rising sun. When they arrived, they found the park nearly empty, with hardly any other visitors. They watched the sunrise together on an observation deck. Then, Yu Xiaodong encouraged his wife, Wan Nan, to join him at the cliff's edge to see some ancient rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Wan Nan trusted her husband's assurance that he would help her climb down and back up safely. As they took in the breathtaking view, Yu Xiaodong suddenly asked Wan Nan if she regretted anything in life. She replied that she did not. However, in a shocking turn of events, Yu Xiaodong's demeanor changed. He touched his wife's hair, kissed her cheek, whispered "die" in her ear, and then pushed her off the cliff. To avoid detection, he checked their surroundings to make sure no one had witnessed the incident. Looking down, he couldn't see where Wan Nan had fallen, and the silence indicated that there were no witnesses below. Yu Xiaodong calmly walked towards the park exit, planning to report the incident after his wife was surely dead. However, hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wan Nan's body on the rocks and immediately called for rescue, reporting the incident. As Yu Xiaodong was leaving the reserve, several emergency vehicles sped past him, sirens blaring. Realizing what was happening, he quickly returned to the scene, pretending to be distressed. There, he put on a convincing performance, crying and begging for help. Convinced that his wife was dead and no one would discover the truth, he remained unaware that Wan Nan's fall had been broken by tree branches, which reduced her speed before she landed on bushes and then rolled onto the rocks. This series of events cushioned the impact, saving her life and that of their child, although she suffered severe injuries. Yu Xiaodong was overcome with grief, crying and lamenting the loss of his wife and child. However, his wife suddenly regained consciousness and attempted to speak, but was unable to. The people around her noticed the genuine horror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but he quickly composed himself and leaned in close to his wife. In a hushed tone, he warned her in Chinese to remain silent if she wanted to survive. Wan Nan's injuries were severe, including head trauma, multiple fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. Her spine was also severely damaged, leaving doctors concerned that even if she survived, she would likely be paralyzed and never walk again. Wan Nan spent several days in a coma, connected to life support machines, during which time her husband remained by her side constantly. However, despite his devoted appearance, Yu Xiaodong's intentions were sinister. Every time he was alone with his wife, he thought about how to complete the job without arousing suspicion. His actions were a ruse, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of love and devotion that he examined the devices, but couldn't find a way to quietly disable them. Wan Nan slowly regained consciousness. When she did, her husband was beside himself with fear. He stayed with her constantly, terrified that she would reveal the truth to the police at any moment. When they were alone, he threatened her again, saying he had nothing to lose. During the initial police interrogation, the Wan Nan supported her husband's claim that her fall was caused by dizziness. However, when her husband briefly left the room, Wan Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and prevent her husband from re-entering. It was then that she recounted the disturbing story of her fall, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu Xiaodong suddenly burst into the room, shouting that his wife was delusional due to her head injury and that he would never harm her or their baby. His explanation was not believable, and he was arrested on the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and intimidation, after her husband was taken into custody and sent to jail to await trial. Wang Nan finally felt a sense of relief. Although she still had a long and difficult recovery ahead of her, she now felt safe. Wang Nan initially held on to hope that her pregnancy could be saved, despite the severe fall. However, her medical team advised her to terminate the pregnancy due to the large amounts of painkillers and antibiotics she was receiving, as well as the multiple surgeries she underwent under general anesthesia. The doctors prioritized Wang Nan's life, warning her that the fetus was unlikely to survive the strong medications. This news came as a devastating shock to Wang Nan, but she ultimately followed the doctor's advice. During the trial, Yu Xiaodong vehemently denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his claim that the incident was an accident. He remained calm and composed in prison, hiring skilled lawyers and expressing confidence that he would either be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence. In contrast, the investigators and prosecutor were convinced that Yu Xiaodong had deliberately committed the crime. Motivated by the prospect of collecting a substantial insurance payout and inheriting his wife's fortune, which was valued at nearly $2.5 million at the time. During an interrogation, Yu Xiaodong made a shocking revelation about his motive for the heinous crime. He disclosed that he was angry with his wife for not paying off his entire debt, which had accumulated due to his gambling habit. In his mind, if his wife truly loved him, she would have cleared all his debts since she had the financial means to do so. This perceived betrayal led Yu Xiaodong to believe that his wife did not love him, and therefore, he felt justified in punishing her. After making this astonishing confession, the defendant became silent, seemingly aware that he had revealed too much. He attempted to retract his statement, claiming that he had been misunderstood. Nevertheless, his unexpected admission, combined with Wang Nan's testimony, was sufficient to secure a lengthy prison sentence. In March 2021, Yu Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed unusual leniency by reducing the life sentence to 10 years in prison. Wang Nan and her family were shocked and outraged by the lenient sentence given to Yu Xiaodong, believing it would set a bad precedent and encourage others to commit similar heinous crimes. Yu Xiaodong received a sentence of 10 years for attempting to murder his pregnant Wang Nan. As of now, Yu Xiaodong is serving her 10-year sentence while Wang Nan is challenging the court's decision. Meanwhile, Yu Xiaodong is filing appeals to prove her innocence. Wang Nan has successfully restarted her business in 2023 and also established an organization that provides support to women who have been affected by domestic violence. She writes about her personal experiences and warnings for women on her blog. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Gerardo couple. Jenner Gerardo was born December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She spent her childhood and teenage years in the area. Jenner graduated from Bishop Luers High School, where she achieved excellent results in advanced courses. She then attended Purdue University at Indianapolis, studying communication and actively participating in the theater arts program. Later, she continued her communication studies at Butler University. Jenner earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication and Theater Arts. Throughout her career, she worked in marketing for various Indiana companies, including roles in Carmel and Indianapolis. Notably, she served as marketing manager at Cercier Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jenner met Mark Gerardo in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At the time, they were both teenagers, and Jenner was working at a local Taco Bell. Mark was immediately drawn to her, captivated by her striking blue eyes and bright smile. Mark was initially unable to express his feelings to Jenner. The romance between Mark and Jenner only really began when they met again by chance after 4 years, at a nearby shopping mall where Jenner was working. He began visiting her frequently, and one day, she encouraged him to make a move, asking him directly when he would take her out. Jenner's confidence and willingness to speak her mind drew Mark to her. He described her demeanor as the opposite of his own, admiring her boldness. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jenner's, recalled how excited Jenner was when she first met Mark, saying Jenner was convinced he was the one and would do anything for him. Mark and Jenner got married on October 23, 1993, when Mark was 25 and Jenner was 23. Their relationship, which began in adolescence, continued to flourish into adulthood. Mark reflected on their happiness together, saying he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else. However, like any couple, Mark and Jenner faced challenges in their marriage and had to navigate the low points together. Mark said the arguments between him and his wife were very tense, and Jenner always won because she wanted to be the one to make the final decision. Mark's high school friend, Mike Hartman, shared that although he wasn't privy to all the details of their relationship, he knew they had fierce disagreements. Despite their strong marriage, the 2008 financial crisis significantly impacted them. Mark later mentioned that it changed everything, and money became a major source of stress and arguments. In November 2011, they relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new marketing jobs. Exploring the state's beautiful landscapes brought them closer together, and their marriage experienced a renewal. However, their renewed life came to a halt in 2017. Jenner lost her job, leaving her struggling to find a new one, and she was no longer the strong, confident woman she once was. Around this time, the couple felt it was time for a change and a fresh start. They decided to move to Delaware, and Mark began looking for a job right away. He came across a job posting at the University of Delaware for a creative director in the marketing department, a role that would come with supervisory responsibilities. Mark emailed his application and quickly received a response from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his supervisor if he got the job. She invited him for an interview. Initially, Mark was nervous about working under someone 15 years younger than him, but his worries soon disappeared after meeting Meredith Chapman. This was their first encounter. At the time, Meredith was 33 years old and originally from Pennsylvania. She had graduated from the University of Delaware with a bachelor's in communication and a master's in education. She was married to Luke, a former New York City councilman, and they lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware, with their dog Indy. The couple had married in 2009. During his interview, Mark was immediately drawn to Meredith's beauty and intelligence. He recalled thinking, "I have to work for this person," within 5 minutes of sitting across from her. He found her articulate, energetic, and passionate about her job, and was impressed by her accomplishments at such a young age. Meredith seemed impressed by Mark, as she immediately offered him the job. Mark gratefully accepted the offer and moved to Wilmington, Delaware in November 2017. His wife, Jenner, stayed behind in South Carolina to lease out their home. Mark was excited about the new opportunity and the chance to advance his career. Unbeknownst to him, this marked the start of the demise of his marriage to Jenner. Mark spent 45 days living alone in Delaware, getting to know Meredith better. They discovered they had a lot in common, and she invited him out for a drink one evening. Mark found it easy to talk to Meredith and opened up to her about his marriage to Jenner, sharing some of his personal struggles. He also told her about the loss of his parents and brother. Mark was unaware of what was happening between him and Meredith at first. Mark stated that he really hadn't known what was happening. He admits that he feels affection for Meredith and expresses that being with her is a wonderful experience. After their dinner date, he started to understand his feelings and realized he was attracted to her. As Mark spent more time with Meredith, the issues in his marriage became more apparent. He began to compare Meredith to his wife, noting that Meredith praised him and made him feel appreciated, which was something his wife never did. Mark was really touched by Meredith's compliments. Mark was deeply attracted to Meredith, but he felt guilty about betraying his wife. As a result, he initially attempted to end his relationship with Meredith. However, he couldn't shake off the feelings he had developed for her, especially after learning that Meredith was unhappy in her own 9-year marriage. Mark explains that his relationship with Meredith is great, which made it difficult for him to shut down the relationship. He wanted to understand what drew them together. Before Jen Eyre joined her husband in Delaware, Mark and Meredith had already confessed their love for each other. Mark felt it was natural to express his love for Meredith, as the feeling was powerful. In December 2017, Jen Eyre moved north and noticed Mark's distant behavior. She soon confronted him, sensing that he might be involved with another woman. Jen Eyre asked Mark what was going on with him and said that he was acting different. Jen Eyre specifically mentioned Meredith because Mark often mentioned her when discussing new job. Although Mark initially denied the affair, Jen Eyre continued to question him, aware that something was amiss between him and Meredith. She began to closely monitor his activities. Mark is confused as to why Jen Eyre knows the private aspects of his affair with Meredith. Around Valentine's Day in 2008, Jen Eyre collected evidence that her husband was having an affair. However, this came at a cost. Mark discovered that Jen Eyre had hired a company to hack into his phone, allowing her to read his texts, view his photos, and access his call records with Meredith. Mark confessed to Jen Eyre that he had developed feelings for Meredith, unable to continue the deception. Jen Eyre, heartbroken but determined to save their marriage, asked Mark to attend marriage counseling with her, and he agreed. However, during their second session, Mark discovered a recording device hidden in his jacket. Initially thinking it was an anti-theft device, he realized it was actively recording him. Furious, Mark confronted Jen Eyre. She claimed she wanted to understand the extent of his relationship with Meredith and suspected they were planning something together. This has been marked the beginning of the end for Mark and Jen Eyre's marriage. Mark eventually told Jen Eyre that he intended to file for divorce in May 2018, once he had met the residency requirements in Delaware and could leave their shared home. During this period, Meredith Chapman's life was on an upward trajectory. She had landed a new role as assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and relocated to Radnor Township. Meanwhile, her marriage was coming to an end, paving the way for her to pursue a relationship with Mark. As Meredith and Mark's relationship deepened, Jen Eyre, was Mark's wife at that time, began consulting with divorce coach Sheila Brennan. Jen Eyre was struggling with feelings of bitterness and anger, stemming from being replaced by a younger woman. Her concerns were compounded by financial uncertainty, having moved north without securing a new job. Jen Eyre's situation continued to deteriorate, ultimately taking a toll on her mental health. Mark noticed her distress and suggested that she see a psychiatrist for professional help. He also encouraged her to reach out to family and friends, as she had mentioned suicidal thoughts and even threatened to jump out of a window. Mark stated that Jen Eyre appeared to have come to terms with their upcoming divorce. She walked up to him with a list of things she wanted him to do in the weeks before he officially moved out. Her requests included activities such as going on hikes, having dinner together, and generally spending quality time as a couple. Mark agreed to fulfill her requests, thinking it would help Jen Eyre be in a better emotional state. During this time, Jen Eyre appeared to be acting normally, although she would occasionally become emotional and break down in tears. Over the next few weeks, Jen Eyre started posting on the app Nextdoor. She was looking for recommendations for a good marriage counselor who could help couples that were close to getting a divorce. In her post, Jen Eyre specified that they needed a counselor with extensive education and experience in handling complex issues such as infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, and child-parent dynamics. However, unbeknownst to Mark, Jen Eyre had secretly been planning her revenge. On the night of April 23, 2018, Mark and his wife Jen Eyre were scheduled to meet at a restaurant to discuss their divorce agreement. However, Jen Eyre sent Mark a series of messages, first saying she was running late, then telling him to go home as she wouldn't make it to the. Mark got up to leave, but minutes later, he received a disturbing picture from Jen Eyre, an image of trash with a condom in the middle. This led him to believe Jen Eyre was rummaging through Meredith's trash can outside her home. More text messages followed, including one that said he had ruined co-life. Jen Eyre's next messages were even more ominous, saying she hoped he never found happiness and she had said goodbye to Mark. Alarmed and fearing for Meredith's safety, Mark tried to contact Meredith multiple times, but all his calls and texts went unanswered. Worried about a confrontation between Jen Eyre and Meredith, Mark rushed to Meredith's house. What he found was far more horrific than he had anticipated. Upon arrival, he discovered Meredith lying face down on her kitchen floor. Around her head was a pool of blood. Nearby, he also found Jen Eyre's lifeless body on the floor. Mark shouted in shock and ran to Meredith. He said, "Baby, oh baby, what have you done?" Meredith had excitedly posted on her Instagram about her new job at Villanova less than 2 hours before she died, expressing her excitement. According to Meredith's 5:42 p.m. post, after just 1 week on the job, she's already earned the love of fans at NOA Nation. Later that evening, she arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, opened the door, and walked inside, unaware that Jen Eyre had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. When Mark got there, Tim, one of Meredith's neighbors, was present. He mentioned that he heard a commotion and went out to see what happened. Mark asked him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Ford of the Radnor Township Police Department said the call made his heart sink. Sergeant Christopher said they don't usually get calls like this. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic with a lot of police present. Mark, who appeared out of breath according to Christopher, was put in an ambulance before being taken to the police station as a suspect. After questioning Mark and discovering that the gun used in the 2 deaths was under Jen Eyre's body, the police concluded that Jen Eyre had broken into Meredith's home, killed her, and then committed suicide. The police received a tip from witness, who claimed to see a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possibly a wig watching the house with binoculars. They also found a set of car keys at the crime scene that were traced to a Cadillac rented by Jen Eyre. Mark was surprised to learn about the Cadillac. He said he learned most of this from the police and the news. Jen Eyre had rented the car 2 weeks before the incident, and it was parked just outside their apartment. Mark continued his investigation by examining his wife's bank statements, phone records, and computer backups, discovering that she was leading a double life. After Mark confessed to his affair shortly after Valentine's Day, he found out that Jen Eyre had opened a secret bank account and credit cards. She used these cards to buy audio surveillance equipment, a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also revealed that she purchased advanced GPS tracking devices and attached them to both his and Meredith's cars. Mark stated that he had found over 400 images of private conversations between Meredith and him from text and Snapchat, and that Jen Eyre would access his phone in the middle of the night. On March 20, 2018, 5 weeks before committing the murder, Jen Eyre bought the gun she used in the murder and suicide. Her credit card statements showed that she practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark claimed that Jen Eyre had secretly placed several recording devices in his clothes. He discovered files containing hundreds of hours of audio recordings his wife had not only recorded but also transcribed into notebooks. According to Mark, Jen Eyre had taken all his jackets and embedded multiple devices, constantly switching them in and out. Every day, she would remove a device, download the recorded content, and then sew it back into his jacket, repeating this process for weeks. It was revealed that on the night Jenner killed Meredith and herself, she emailed a letter to her family, chillingly explaining her motive. She had begun the letter weeks prior, dating her entries, and described how it was an act of revenge for what he had done to her, saying, "That's as simple as it gets." Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist who studied marriage-related homicides and Red Letter, suggested that Jen Eyre may have been driven to kill Meredith and herself because she could not bear losing Mark. Dr. Robin commented that, in his opinion, there was something about listening to the recordings that made Jen Eyre angry and upset. Dr. Robin went on to say that Jen Eyre found the strength to act because she believed that her suspicions about her husband's character were correct. However, when she became suicidal and lost hope in life, she became more dangerous. It seemed that she had arranged everything to make her husband suffer. In a TV interview with Dr. Ozark, Mark shared a shocking revelation. Jen Eyre had written a 15-page letter, confessing that if he had walked in on the crime scene, she would have killed him as well. He acknowledged that he had hurt Jen Eyre, and his greatest regret was making her feel trapped and without options. He deeply wished he could travel back in time and erase the hurt he had caused. He confessed that his love for Jen Eyre had remained strong and never disappeared. Mark explained that he drove by Meredith's house multiple times as a way to cope with his emotions and come to terms with what had happened, helping him to process his feelings and move on. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, Due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point Hickey's parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m. but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail, saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m. for some unknown reason, when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Allah Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Allah Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alicia Canales McGuire. On September 20th, 2017, around 1:55 a.m., a series of events unfolded in Everett, Washington. Multiple people dialed 911 after being startled by loud bangs. 10 minutes after the initial calls, police officers arrived at the scene, where they were met with a horrific sight. 24-year-old Alicia Canales McGuire lay dead on the doorstep, just outside the door. Investigators cracked this heartbreaking case thanks to social media and CCTV footage. Born on October 29, 1992 in Mount Vernon, Washington, Alicia was the daughter of Manuel and Michelle Canales. Throughout her adult life, she worked as a caregiver, driven by her passion for helping others. Raised on a farm, Alicia started working at the age of 5, which instilled in her the value of hard work. She often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Alicia cherished family time, regularly visiting and speaking with her loved ones, never failing to express her love when bidding them farewell. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradley. The couple got married in a beautiful beach ceremony at Deception Pass in July 2017. However, the investigators soon discovered that Alicia didn't reside in the house where she died. Instead, it was her sister Amanda Canales' home, where Amanda lived with her 3 kids. Amanda had a work commitment in New York and asked Alicia to take care of her children during her absence. Alicia, who adored her nephew and nieces, was more than happy to help out. There was a staying nanny in the house with her, and she was one of those who called 911. She woke up to the sound of gunshots, and when she went downstairs, she saw that Alicia was lying at the front door and not moving. The police officers who arrived at the scene took immediate action, beginning with a thorough examination of the house to rule out the possibility that the perpetrator was still inside. They conducted a meticulous search, confirming that only the nanny and Amanda's children were present in the house. Once the frightened children had been safely removed from the house, the police commenced their investigation for evidence. A car parked in front of the house caught their attention, with shell casings discovered nearby, indicating that the shooter had been standing beside the vehicle, just before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's lifeless body was found lying face down, right outside the door. It didn't resemble a robbery. The house was tidy, and it seemed as though the perpetrator hadn't even stepped inside. But who would want Alicia dead, and what could be the motive behind it? When the detectives found out that it was her sister's house, they began to suspect that it was a case of mistaken identity. Perhaps Amanda was the target, but she was in New York when the crime occurred. The nanny, a witness who was present in the house at the time of the crime, provided a calm and coherent account to the investigators. During questioning, she explained that she was upstairs when she heard the sound of gunshots. Upon looking down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. However, she did not see the perpetrator of the shooting. Startled, the nanny immediately called 911. The nanny gave the police the first crucial lead. She reported that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had problems with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. The detectives pored over the reports from the local sheriff's office and discovered that this was not the first time someone had called the police to that address. Every prior incident involved domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis, which caught the detectives' attention. They obtained Kevin Lewis's home address, situated in a different part of Everett, and paid him a visit before dawn to conduct an interview. Although his house was shrouded in darkness, Kevin responded to their knock on the door. During the conversation, the officers asked Kevin if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. He looked like he had just woken up. The detectives asked him to tell them where he had spent the night, and he said he had been at home all night, with his sister and mother able to confirm this. He didn't ask what was the reason for the detectives' visit. When the detectives told Kevin about the shooting at his children's residence, he remained impassive, which raised suspicions. A typical parent would have asked about their children's well-being, but Kevin didn't. The detectives then informed Kevin that Amanda was out of town on business, to which he reacted with apparent surprise, saying, "Really?" Next, the detectives investigated neighboring houses and discovered that 2 of them had surveillance cameras that could corroborate or contradict Kevin's alibi. The footage revealed that Kevin's claim of staying home all night was false. A car was seen pulling up to his driveway approximately 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. The footage showed someone resembling Kevin leaving the house, entering the car, and driving away. Although the recording quality was poor, the police couldn't positively identify the individual. A closer review of footage from another camera provided additional details about the car. While they couldn't identify the vehicle's make, they noticed that the front right rim was a different color from the other 3 light-colored rims. The car returned to Kevin's neighborhood about 20 minutes before the 911 calls reporting the shooting started. The person who had entered the car earlier returned to the house and went back inside. Amanda learned about her sister Alicia's death a few hours later, while she was in New York. When the investigators asked Amanda if she thought her ex-husband Kevin could have been the one who shot Alicia, she replied that she had no doubt it was him. Even though their 8-year marriage had ended, Amanda was still not ready to fully acknowledge how toxic the relationship with her ex-husband had been. Amanda was deeply unhappy throughout their marriage. Even after their divorce in June 2017, Kevin's threats continued to intimidate her. He had physically abused her in the past, and despite their separation, he remained a threat. After the divorce, Amanda was awarded full custody of their 3 children, and Kevin was ordered to pay $800 monthly in child support. However, he repeatedly violated the restraining order, showing up outside her home and terrifying both Amanda and their children. Despite these violations, the police never charged Kevin with any crime. Amanda suffered a severe beating in her driveway just a few weeks before her sister's death. One night, she arrived home late and parked her car next to her house. As she opened the door, someone attacked her. The assault happened so quickly that she didn't get a glimpse of the attacker's face. Nevertheless, she was certain who was responsible: Kevin Lewis, 30, who would later become the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia Canales McGuire, Amanda's sister. The investigators believed that he intended to take the life of his ex-wife. Kevin did not know that she was in New York during that time, and he didn't know that Amanda had asked Alicia to look after her children while she was away. However, there was an inconsistency in this theory. If the man in the footage was really Kevin, it meant he was at his house at the time of the shooting. In addition, his sister and mother provided him with an alibi. The police continued their investigation, exploring various explanations for what had occurred. They revisited Amanda's house to re-examine the scene, including the path the bullets took. According to experts, Alicia was shot when the door was ajar, and the shooter fired at least 7 times, with the shots coming from outside the house and entering it. The evidence gathered at the scene suggested that the shooter stood next to the garage, firing initially, before moving towards the door and firing again from inside it. The medical examiner identified the cause of Alicia's death as multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso. She got struck by 5 shots, and 2 of the wounds showed gunpowder stippling injury. The medical examiner testified that he could not determine the sequence of the 5 shots, but said that the last 2 gunshot wounds to the head were probably the last 2 wounds inflicted. According to the experts, the 7 shell casings found at the crime scene were fired from the same firearm, and the bullet wounds to Alicia's head were inflicted at close range. The investigators analyzed this theory, but didn't find any evidence confirming this. The shell casings found at the crime scene also attracted the attention of the police because this brand of casings was not very common. They were Russian-made casings manufactured under the Tulamo brand. Since it was not a very common brand, the investigators hoped they would identify the seller of these cartridges and maybe even the buyer. The investigators found that Walmart had sold .40 caliber cartridges of a specific brand, with one of the stores located near the crime scene. Walmart representatives informed the detectives that a man had recently bought 9mm Tulamo cartridges, and they had CCTV footage of the transaction. The detectives promptly visited Walmart to review the footage, which was recorded on September 18th, 2 days prior to Alicia's death. They initially suspected that Kevin Lewis might be the buyer, but they were mistaken. The man in the footage was not Kevin, and he had paid using a credit card. The investigators looked into this individual and discovered no connection to Kevin Lewis, Amanda, or the nanny, forcing them to search for new evidence. After thoroughly examining all the existing theories, the investigators approached Amanda to gather new information about Kevin. Initially, Amanda stated that their relationship was okay during the honeymoon phase, but Kevin's behavior gradually became more aggressive, culminating in physical abuse. Their tumultuous relationship ultimately ended in divorce, with a restraining order issued against Kevin and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite her emotional distress, Amanda firmly believed that Alicia's death was a case of mistaken identity, convinced that the intended target was actually herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but the police found that Kevin had a solid alibi, as he was at home during the time of the shooting. The investigators have again reviewed the footage taken on the night of Alicia's death. Now they noticed something they hadn't noticed before. This low-quality recording shows Kevin, or the man who left his house, walking up to the car and getting into the back seat behind the driver. But why didn't he get into the front passenger seat? In search of an answer, the investigators concluded that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat. Therefore, by the time the car pulled up to Kevin Lewis's house, there were probably already 2 people in it, and perhaps that's why he had to sit in the back seat. The police had no evidence to link Kevin to Alicia's death. However, they gathered evidence of Kevin's attacks on his ex-wife Amanda and arrested him in November 2018. The court sentenced him to 3 years in prison. More than a year had passed since Alicia's death, but the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2019, a breakthrough finally occurred when a woman contacted the police station with crucial information. She provided a tip that a girl who lived in nearby Spokane had been overheard bragging at a party about being hired to kill someone on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given that Spokane is about 5 hours away from Everett, they decided to investigate further. The woman who called said she was at a party where she met a young woman who introduced herself as Angelica. The latter bragged about how she and her boyfriend participated in the crime. According to this woman, Angelica said someone died because of a shot in the head, and they were shooting from around the corner and were hired by the children's father. Moreover, Angelica said they took the wrong person's life. It was a case of mistaken identity. The police never publicly disclosed the details of this case, but investigators and family members were aware that Alicia had been fatally shot in the head. Since Angelica possessed knowledge of the crime's specifics, the police became intrigued by her information. During their search for Angelica, investigators discovered that her real name was Alexis Hale. On her social media, they found photos of her posing with a 9mm pistol, which may have been the murder weapon. Additionally, there were several videos showing a man in the background, later identified as Alexis's boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. On the night of Alicia's death, Alexis Hale posted a video filmed through the windshield of a car, analyzing the road signs. The investigators determined the exact location of this car at that moment. It was about a 10-minute drive from Kevin Lewis's house. In the following video taken a few hours after Alicia's death, Jadon Phelps bragged about a wad of money. The investigators saw 5 comments under Phelps's photo on social media, and one of the comments was from his aunt, whom they recognized as Kevin Lewis's mother. It turned out that Jadon Phelps was Kevin's cousin. The police had sufficient evidence to make arrests. The first person they detained was Alexis Hale, who was 17 years old. As the officers handcuffed her, she protested, claiming they had no right to arrest her due to her age, yet she seemed aware of the reasons behind her arrest. She promptly requested a lawyer. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, the police took Jadon Phelps into custody. The investigators used Phelps and Hale's phone records to show that they had driven from Spokane to Everett to carry out the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors showed someone getting into a car in the early hours of September 20th. The man in a white top left at 11:13 a.m. and returned at 1:37 a.m. When the police went to see Lewis after Alicia's death, he was wearing a white top. Alexis remained silent with the investigators. At the time, Kevin Lewis, now known as Kevin, was serving a 3-year prison sentence for assaulting Amanda. The investigators turned to Phelps, the one who had arranged the crime, hoping to gather information. As they suspected, Phelps confessed and revealed the name of the man who had hired him, Kevin Lewis. The police took Phelps to the crime scene where he provided further details of the crime. Phelps initially just showed them where the house was, and they were taking him back to his home. Later, when they went back, Phelps showed them the area where he was standing, and he described how Alicia opened the door slightly, and as Lexi was walking towards them, Phelps started shooting at the door. Alicia closed the door, and Phelps opened it and fired a few more shots. Kevin Lewis, who was already in jail on an unrelated charge, was arrested on charges of aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder for the September 2017 death of Alicia Canales McGuire. In July 2020, Phelps, who was then 20, pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder, and the court sentenced him to 31 years in prison. Hale, who was then 18, pleaded guilty to the same charge and got 15 years. Phelps testified at the trial that he had committed the crime for money and the street cred. He claimed he had spent the money Lewis paid him to get some tattoos, a pair of Timberland boots, and a Ferragamo belt buckle. He also claimed his former girlfriend had got the pistol from a family member. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced a trial later that year. The prosecution said that he had paid $2,400 to his cousin and his girlfriend to get his ex-wife out of the way, turning them into teenage assassins. But in a tragic case of mistaken identity, it had been Alicia who had opened the door. Phelps said Lewis had directed them to the home, but claimed he didn't know who the target was, just the address. On the way back, Lewis handed Phelps an envelope of money after dropping Lewis back at his residence. Phelps and Hale returned to the location Lewis had pointed out, and Phelps fired the gun until it was empty, starting from his position near the garage, and fired the last couple after walking up to the front porch. The muzzle of the gun crossed the threshold. The last couple of shots were around the neck and head area. Phelps and Hale left in their car, but then returned because they believed they might have left a glove at the scene. When they returned, they saw police cars, so they turned around and left. They accessed GPS directions and drove back to Spokane. The defense argued that Lewis had never actually used the word kill when talking to his cousin and had simply said to get the target out of the way. But the prosecution reminded the court of Kevin's history of violence and the threats he'd made against Amanda. In November 2021, Lewis was found guilty of first-degree murder by a jury following a 6-week trial that lasted less than 3.5 hours. In January 2022, at the age of 34, Kevin was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. As part of the sentence, Judge Thompson prohibited Lewis from having any contact with his ex-wife, children, Phelps, and Hale for the remainder of his life. According to records, Lewis is currently serving his sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Min Lin and Yun Li Lin's love story began in the late 1980s during their college years at an Australian university. Both were natives of China who had separately emigrated to Australia to pursue higher education. Yun Li through an exchange program, and Min, who was 2 years her senior, remained in the country for a professional internship. They met in a university corridor, which they later recalled as a case of love at first sight. They shared common roots and dreams, and both felt like outsiders in a foreign land, but were united by their aspirations to start a new life in Australia. After graduation, the couple married and settled in the picturesque and peaceful suburb of North Epping in Sydney. Their love grew into a large, close-knit family, deeply connected and devoted to one another. In August 1994, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named June Brenda Lin, who was commonly known by her middle name Brenda. Their son Henry was born in 1997, followed by the youngest, Terry, in 2000. Entering the 2000s, Min and Yun Li decided to start a business venture, opening a small newsstand. Their dedication transformed this modest beginning into a thriving news agency with its publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business prospered, enabling them to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle with a spacious home, a luxury car, and prestigious private schooling for their children. Min focused on business matters, while Yun Li dedicated herself to homemaking and nurturing their children. In their community, the Lins were well respected for their diligence, kindness, and charitable work. They were known as exemplary, caring parents who avoided conflicts. Brenda, their eldest, was exceptionally beautiful and an excellent student with a compassionate nature towards animals. The boys, Henry and Terry, were energetic and sports-loving, sharing a passion for soccer. The siblings shared a strong bond and were almost inseparable. As the Lin family settled in Australia and their financial prosperity grew, they began inviting relatives from China to visit, live, or even stay permanently. In the early 2000s, Min's parents were the first to move to North Epping, living nearby and helping with the children. Min's father also worked in their newsstand on weekends. A few years later, Yun Li's parents also moved to the Sydney suburb, with Min and Yun Li buying them a small house. Yun Li's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lins, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. Their venture wasn't just a shop or publishing house. It had become a local hub where people gathered to read and discuss news over coffee. Towards the end of 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin Nai, and her husband, Lian Bin Robert, also moved to Australia, seeking better opportunities in the bustling city of Sydney. They had visited relatives in Australia before and briefly lived in Melbourne, but this time they were determined to settle in Australia permanently. Robert, a former successful ENT doctor in China, decided to switch careers and try entrepreneurship. The Lins opened their own restaurant in Sydney, investing all their savings, but the business struggled and soon closed. Subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed, as Robert lacked business acumen and financial management skills. Eventually, Robert and Kathy moved to North Epping, closer to family. The Lynn and Robert families were bound not only by kinship, but also by strong friendship. They saw each other almost daily, stayed in constant touch, and often gathered for family meals. Their last such gathering was on the evening of Friday, July 17, 2009, at the home of Kathy and Min's parents. Unbeknownst to them, this would be their final reunion. The Lynn family home was the scene of a gruesome massacre on the morning of July 18th. The Lynn family's shop remained unexpectedly closed, surprising their regular customers. The shop, which had operated 7 days a week for years, showed no signs of opening, with no notice or warning on the doors. This unusual occurrence raised concerns among the customers and neighboring shop owners. One of them, after several unsuccessful attempts to reach Min, called his sister Kathy to inquire about the situation. Kathy was both surprised and alarmed, knowing her brother had never closed the shop for a day without prior arrangements, often having their father or father-in-law cover for him. She tried calling Min and then his wife Yunli, but to no avail, as her calls to their home phone also went unanswered. Worried, Kathy and her husband Robert decided to visit Min's house to ensure everything was all right. Arriving around 9 a.m., they noticed the family car in the driveway and found the front door unlocked, but no sign of the homeowners. The house was eerily quiet, and calls for the family members went unanswered. The house appeared undisturbed, with no signs of forced entry. Kathy, repeatedly calling out for her brother, ascended to the second floor. Upon opening the bedroom door of Min and Yunli Lin, she screamed in shock and horror, staggering back at the gruesome scene before her. The room was completely covered in blood, across the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. The lifeless body of 43-year-old Yunli Lin lay near the bed, mutilated beyond immediate recognition. In the adjacent room where 39-year-old Irene, Yunli's sister, slept, the scene was equally ghastly. Irene lay dead in her bed, her face a bloody pulp. In the children's bedrooms, 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry had also been brutally beaten to death, their bodies lying in different corners of the room. Brenda, the 15-year-old daughter, had fortunately been away on a school trip the previous day and was not at home during the tragic night. The body of Min Lin was nowhere to be found, leading to a faint hope that he might be alive, possibly injured, taken hostage, or escaped. Kathy immediately called emergency services, but she was so hysterical from the shock that she struggled to convey what had happened. She screamed and cried into the phone, begging for medics to arrive quickly and try to save anyone they could. However, the first responders could only confirm the deaths of all the victims at the scene of the massacre. The morning after, a chilling discovery followed Kathy's frantic call to emergency services. Robert left to fetch the Lin parents, who lived about 10 kilometers away from the crime scene. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes, and what they encountered was immediately dubbed as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever witnessed. Tragically, it was too late for any member of the Lin family. Each had been killed by multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object resembling a hammer. However, the lethal weapon was nowhere to be found, leading investigators to conclude that the perpetrator had taken it with them. Min Lin's body was eventually discovered in his own bedroom, covered with a blood-soaked blanket. Like his family, he had been beaten to death in a similar manner. It appeared that he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and lastly the two boys. An initial inspection of the crime scene did not yield any significant clues or leads. The absence of the lethal weapon, combined with the fact that valuables and money were left untouched, indicated that the primary objective was the elimination of the Lin family rather than robbery. Initially, multiple assailants were suspected, as it seemed unlikely that one person could single-handedly overpower so many. However, evidence suggested that the children were awake and had desperately tried to escape during the attack, as indicated by blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Interestingly, all adult victims besides head injuries also showed signs of strangulation, possibly to minimize resistance during the assault. Identical bloody shoe prints were found in each room with a unique tread pattern, but the shoe brand could not be identified, only its size. No fingerprints were discovered, suggesting that the killer or killers wore gloves. At first, there were no leads or theories about the identity of the perpetrator, as family, friends, and neighbors unanimously stated that the Lins had no known enemies. The motive for such a brutal massacre of 5 people remained unclear. The time of the attack was established to be between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lynn, the eldest and now the sole survivor of the extensive Lynn family, was on a school trip to New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She first learned of the horrific incident through social media and initially refused to believe that it involved her own family, hoping for some mistake. Her Aunt Kathy soon called her, confirming the dreadful news through tearful sobs. Brenda was quickly flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert, her new guardians, met her at the airport. Brenda moved in with them as the Lynn family home was sealed as a crime scene. The next day, a grief-stricken Brenda was brought to the police station for questioning. However, she could offer no new information, insisting that her family had no enemies or ill-wishers and had noticed nothing unusual before her trip. Following her family's death, Brenda became the heir to a substantial fortune, including property in the family business. However, being a minor and still in school, her legal guardians, Aunt Kathy and her husband Robert, were responsible for managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents also offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her primary caretakers. Robert even threatened legal action if the elderly relatives sought custody, arguing they were too old to care for a teenager. Eventually, the matter was settled amicably, and Brenda remained with her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business, which had been temporarily closed, soon reopened under the management of the deceased, as Brenda was yet to take over the business operations. Robert also began actively reviewing the family's bank accounts, savings, real estate, and other assets. Investigation and theories experts repeatedly scrutinized the crime scene meticulously, documenting every detail. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads emerged. They deduced that the killer likely acted alone and entered the house quietly, suggesting either an unlocked door or the perpetrator having a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinct ornate tread pattern. The lethal weapon, believed to be a hammer, was never found in or around the house. The killer's use of gloves meant no fingerprints were left behind, and no foreign DNA was found, only traces from the 5 victims. A peculiar and significant detail was that blood stains were found on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the perpetrators occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves touched them. However, there were no blood stains on the doorknob of Brenda's room, suggesting the killer knew she was not there. As one of Australia's most high-profile cases, the tragic incident was widely covered in the media, with no substantial evidence or suspects. Various improbable theories emerged, including rumors about the Lynn's alleged vast fortune leading to their demise, a robbery gone wrong, and even involvement of local Chinese mafia clans. These theories weren't entirely dismissed, given the area's history with a burglary gang, as the Lynn shop had been attacked months before the tragedy, and men had witnessed an armored car robbery a week before the fatal incidents, although the criminals wore masks and the men couldn't identify them. It was speculated that the perpetrator might have been eliminated as a potential witness. Months passed with the investigation at a standstill. None of the theories were substantiated, and no suspects emerged. The robbery theory was eventually ruled out as money and valuables were untouched, and the killer seemed to have a different motive, singular purpose to eliminate the household members. Additionally, the power was cut off in the house on the night of the fatal incidents, indicating the killer knew where the electrical panel was, as their familiarity with the house in total darkness suggested they had been there before and knew the layout, possibly even obtaining a key in advance, a crucial overlooked clue. While reviewing the perplexing case details, an investigator repeatedly listened to Kathy's emergency call, searching for any overlooked clue. Surprisingly, a significant hint was found in that recording. The recording captured Kathy's hysterical attempts to explain the situation, her words jumbled and interrupted by cries and sobs. At the end of the call, when the operator confirmed that emergency services were on their way, Kathy unexpectedly mentioned her husband's name, adding something in Cantonese, directly addressing him. This detail piqued the investigators' interest, prompting them to translate her words. It turned out Kathy was pleading with her husband not to leave her alone in the house. This was significant because Robert had decided to fetch the Lynn parents on his own, leaving Kathy at the gruesome crime scene before the police arrived. Robert's behavior seemed highly suspicious, as 5 people had just been brutally taken away from the house, and the killer could still have been hiding inside, making Kathy a potential target. Yet Robert appeared calm and simply left as if he knew nothing bad would happen to his wife. After several unproductive months, the police finally identified a primary and sole suspect, Robert. It was discovered that he had a key to his brother-in-law's house, which his in-laws had given him just in case, shortly before the tragedy. Curiously, Robert never mentioned this during interrogations, and Kathy was unaware that her brother had given her husband a key. Brenda unknowingly revealed this crucial detail to the investigators. Further investigation revealed that Robert's claim of being a successful ENT doctor was a facade. While he did possess a medical degree, he never held a stable job in the field. Rumors suggested he fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish himself professionally, squandering the last of his savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became essentially idle, relying on his wife's income and occasional financial assistance from Kathy's relatives. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lynn family's estate. His first move was to force Lynn's parents out of the house that Min had bought for them, though it was legally under the deceased name. Even though Men and Kathy's parents remained in the house bought for them, considering these facts and circumstances, investigators theorized that Robert was driven by intense envy of his wife's more successful and wealthy relatives, harboring a long-standing plan to seize their property, money, and lucrative business. Despite living under the same roof as the perpetrator of the crime against her family, Brenda and Kathy weren't considered in immediate danger. Brenda was oblivious to the true nature of her cohabitant, while Kathy was needed by Robert to maintain control over the family's assets. However, the police couldn't arrest Robert yet due to lack of concrete evidence against him. Interrogation, surveillance, and arrest. The investigation team obtained permission to install several hidden cameras in the Robert household, hoping to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unsuspecting revelation by Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned her husband's preference for a particular brand of shoes a few years back. Robert had purchased 2 pairs of sneakers from a limited edition series that he particularly liked. He had worn out and discarded one pair, but the other was still carefully stored in its box at their home. Notably, Robert wore size 9.5 shoes, the same size as the killer's. The key evidence came when Robert was captured on one of the hidden cameras, meticulously destroying the box of the aforementioned shoes. This footage led to a warrant to search the suspect's home, where a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers was found. The tread pattern on these shoes matched the prints found at the crime scene. Additionally, a small smeared trace resembling blood was discovered in his garage. Forensic analysis confirmed that it was indeed a blood stain containing the DNA of all 5 Lynn family victims, literally linking it to the crime scene. This evidence led to Robert's arrest, finally providing the concrete proof the police needed to take action. During the trial, shocking revelations emerged. Robert vehemently denied any involvement, claiming the blood found in his garage appeared after their return from the Lynn house. He also dismissed the significance of the sneakers with matching tread patterns found in his possession, asserting they were brand new and that he had immediately disposed of the old pair. While awaiting trial in prison for 3 years, Robert unknowingly shared cells with several informants. In one such conversation, he confessed to meticulously planning the crime and carefully covering his tracks. He mentioned buying the lethal weapon in a remote store without surveillance cameras and drugging his wife with sedatives in tea to prevent her from waking up and noticing his absence. He disposed of the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing in a manner that ensured they would never be found. At the trial, Robert denied everything, and the only evidence against him were the statements from his cellmates and the previously mentioned indirect evidence. As a result, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, and Robert was released on bail in December 2015. The trial resumed in June 2016 with testimony from another informant who claimed Robert confessed to an obsession with Brenda since she was 13. This led to a re-examination of Brenda, who tearfully admitted that Robert had coerced her into a sexual relationship shortly after she started living with them. Fearing retaliation, she had remained silent about the abuse for years. With these revelations and considering other evidence, Robert was found guilty on all charges. He received 5 life sentences, one for each fatal crime without the possibility of parole. All his subsequent appeals were rejected. The Abril Perez case unveils layers of tragedy and mystery, set against the backdrop of a Mexican night where stars shine brightly, yet secrets linger in the shadows. This story revolves around Abril, whose life became a series of unfortunate events. The case progressed slowly. It took months before the first suspects were captured. The Secretary General of the Mexican Security Council, Omar Garcia, announced that on March 5, 2020, 2 individuals connected to this crime were detained. He made it clear that all detainees had been identified and were under investigation. The initial suspects were Juan Carlos Rodriguez Ortiz, the car driver, and Rodolfo Daniel Bandera Sandoval, also known as Changa Leon, who was identified as the shooter. These 2 became prime suspects post their arrests. Abril's family insisted on Juan Carlos's arrest, believing him to be the crime's orchestrator. Following an attack on Abril, judges who had initially freed Juan returned to work but faced suspension again due to public outrage. After 7 months, on October 28, 2 more suspects were detained: Oscar, known as El Oso, and Alejandro, known as El Corral. El Corral was arrested with his girlfriend, Magda Carina. In her bag were found 3 packets of illegal substances alongside a weapon and weighing scales for narcotics. El Oso was apprehended at his home, where police discovered 182 doses of illegal substances, guns, and 300 rounds of large-caliber ammunition. These detainees belonged to a gang led by Juan Carlos Maldon, also known as Juan Balta, who was later arrested too. Known as a trusted leader within one of Mexico City's most notorious gangs, he was found in possession of significant quantities of illegal substances during his capture. Court records indicated that Juan Balta met Juan Carlos while in prison, offering protection for money. After his release, Juan continued receiving financial aid from Balta. It is believed that Juan Carlos sought Balta's assistance to arrange the murder of 2 people who threatened his ex-wife's life. Abril Perez's tale is equally heart-wrenching. Born in Monterrey in 1971, Abril grew up under challenging circumstances with her mother Maria del Suero, tirelessly working to secure the best education in life for Abril and her siblings, Javier and Ana. Despite hardships, Abril excelled academically with a clear goal: achieving financial independence through education. As she matured into an intelligent and altruistic woman with notable leadership qualities, she pursued higher education rigorously. She earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Nuevo León and later acquired her master's degree in business from Monterrey Institute of Science and Technology. Her career flourished in digital sales, where she rose swiftly to hold an executive director position at Bilbo Bank in America by the early 1990s. During this prosperous phase in her career, Abril met Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, a driven entrepreneur born on November 11, 1968. Sharing many academic accolades and professional aspirations, Juan also graduated from Monterrey Institute like Abril, and furthered his studies at prestigious institutes such as the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. Both driven by ambition and intellect, quickly grew close both personally and professionally. They collaborated on several projects while nurturing friendships within shared social circles. Over time, their camaraderie blossomed into love, leading them down the aisle together in 1994. Together, they spearheaded numerous successful ventures, including PAG Mobile and Plascom online stores. Their combined efforts contributed significantly towards establishing DM Store as a leading e-commerce entity in Mexico by 1999. The couple's life appeared to be a genuine fairy tale. Both achieved remarkable successes in their careers and were blissful together. Their joy amplified in 2001 with the birth of their first daughter, Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Juan Carlos Jr., and in 2005, another son, Julio Andres, was born. Despite her busy schedule, Abril always made time for her children, personally attending to their needs and school. Her dedication earned admiration from everyone around her. Juan Carlos was also seen as an exemplary father. Together, they cultivated an ideal family that many envied. But the reality was different. During that period, the family faced substantial challenges, suffering from Juan's short temper. He had a volatile nature and could unleash his anger on anyone around him. Initially, it began with verbal abuse. Juan made Abril uncomfortable with hurtful insults. Gradually, the situation worsened as he started using physical violence, regularly beating his wife. Abril tried to conceal it from friends and family because she believed staying with Juan would secure the best future for their children. By 2009, others began suspecting something was wrong at home due to Abril's evident depression and visible bruises. However, despite inquiries about a possible divorce, she insisted on staying with her husband. The situation continued to get worse up until 2014. Despite Juan Carlos reaching the pinnacle of his career in 2014 as an influential figure in the Amazon retail industry in Mexico, turmoil persisted within the family. By 2015, his new role as Amazon director necessitated a move to Mexico City, a change that did not solve their problems. The abuse continued daily while he maintained a facade of being a loving husband and father publicly. Juan Carlos often shared social media posts calling Abril the love of his life, while privately controlling and accusing her of infidelity, even hiring a detective to prove it. His career soared while his marriage crumbled before his eyes. By 2018, tensions between him and Abril were unbearable. Despite her efforts to maintain family unity after a trip to Monterrey for Christmas celebrations with her family in 2018, an incident made her realize she could no longer continue living with him. During this visit, and driven by irrational rage, Juan strangled Abril after receiving misleading photos from a private investigator, falsely implying an affair with a colleague. On January 4, 2019, Abril finally decided enough was enough and filed for divorce. Early one morning, not long after this decision, while asleep, Abril awoke from severe blows to her head inflicted by Juan wielding a baseball bat, thinking initially that perhaps something catastrophic like ceiling collapse must have occurred, only soon recognizing it was indeed her husband assaulting her maliciously. Attempting desperately but unsuccessfully fleeing, whilst calling out loud, attracting attention, ultimately saved by eldest son, then 16 years old, who intervened preventing further harm. Whisking mother off hospital, seeking urgent medical treatment given extensive injuries sustained. Subsequently, following these harrowing events, Juan engaged heavily online, alleging numerous accusations against estranged wife, including infidelity, theft, alongside bizarre claims wounded by stabbing, even posting graphic images incriminatingly, albeit deceptively manipulative, stirring confusion, disbelief, widely questioning veracity, credibility, amidst alarmingly strange, unsupported assertions. Curiously culminating contradictorily stating sensationally considerably fabricated declaration, preposterously claiming own premature demise, astonishingly baffling, many since plainly alive-ative concerned, reflecting potential underlying complexities yet conspicuously revealing tragically profound adverse impact, profoundly affecting gravely matters warranting earnest consideration, reflective deliberation and sight, acknowledging persistently injustice, undeniably suffered, profoundly consequentially induced, primarily generated systematically intentionally premeditated abusive conduct behavior, regrettably adversely experienced and rich perspective understanding eloquently articulated herein, professionally gravitating, empathetic recognition importance, human, judicious appreciating jointly responsibly collectively fostering principled integrity, social positive transformation, conducive harmonious peaceful, equitable coexistence, pivotal quintessential consequential imperative. After being discharged from the hospital, Abril immediately filed a police report against her husband. Authorities granted her custody of her 2 children. Juan Carlos was ordered to pay alimony of 6,000 Mexican pesos per month, about $350. However, this amount did not cover the costs of raising 2 young children. Despite these financial difficulties and the fear of her husband, Abril decided to start a new chapter in her life and was determined not to be discouraged for the sake of her children. Subsequently, Abril and her children moved to Monterrey. From there, she observed the trial against Juan Carlos and filed for divorce. After enduring such a traumatic experience and constant abuse, she began rethinking her life decisions. She joined a Christian group dedicated to protecting families and started working as a divorce counselor. Her goal was to create an organization that would help women who had been abused like she had been. Thanks to such an organization, Abril herself managed to heal and even forgave her ex-husband. While she was striving to rebuild her life, the lawsuit against Juan continued. After 9 long months following the attack, authorities charged him with attempted murder. The case went to court where Judge Federico Mask decided on an informal arrest for Juan. Thus, he was taken into custody for several weeks. However, Juan appealed the verdict, and on November 3, 2019, another judge, named Hector Jimenez, reclassified the crime. He opined that photographs from the hospital and testimonies from Abril and her son were insufficient to prove Juan's guilt definitively. Moreover, he believed that Juan did not intend to kill Abril, otherwise he would have succeeded. According to the judge, the baseball bat used in the attack was not considered a weapon suitable for murder. Consequently, the case no longer qualified as femicide, and Juan's preliminary arrest was canceled. There were only a few hearings left in Juan's trial. The outcome remained uncertain, causing increasing anxiety and frustration for Abril, her family, and friends. Desperately seeking relief, Abril wrote a letter to the judge pleading for consideration of her fears for her safety. She firmly believed Juan posed a real threat, but received no response to her plea. Following this development, Juan Carlos was released from custody and began actively fighting for custody of his children. Abril had no choice but to leave Monterrey and travel to Mexico City frequently for all hearings related to their case, and subjected her children to psychological evaluations because Juan Carlos claimed she had turned them against him. This supposedly explained why they wanted nothing more than distance from their father forever again. A week before crucial hearing session date drew near, the crucial one, Abril gathered 3 kids, telling them how much love felt, pushing each towards dreams fulfillment while urging strength needed forgiveness. Side note, relatable indeed. On November 25th, in compliance throughout with ex's instructions avoiding legal tangles, separating loved ones altogether, arrived Mexico City, intended meeting, taking place same day when thousands, women marked street celebration, Anti-Gender Violence Day, globally impactful symbol, indeed reflecting broader struggle ongoingly seen, meanwhile yes, continuing relentless fight, march, so to speak, right? Time passed until March 19th next year, bringing turning point judicial-wise canceling previous handling actions, revisiting the settling attempted murder. Abril reinstated following collective push, relatives prosecution line formal appeals requiring plus subsequent petitions array highlighting repetition involving case assuring dominion, Finally, May settled arrests, finalized trio women Solomon rounding elements critical search warrants, altogether findings detailed captured each identified notably care overall, background thoroughness punctuate course interims pan explaining prosecutor touching essence clarifications, juxtaposing initial attempt, comparably then elevating upholding right societal realms, subsequently prompted sweeping comprehensive research, yielding vital breakthrough imperative efforts nearing affirmative closure, integrity bind scrutinizing laying hopper diverse parallel obligations extended Rawls pursuit persistently subsequently engaged recognized alias Shalon loop continued fundamentally. During the interrogation, Rolf, also known as El Shalon, confessed that he was the individual who shot and killed Abril. Ultimately, he pleaded guilty, stating that Juan Carlos had offered him $10,000 to commit the crime. He detailed how Juan Carlos had contacted him while still in pretrial detention. Over the phone, Juan provided Abril's address in Mexico City, along with instructions on how to perform surveillance on her and execute the crime. Furthermore, Juan assured him that a gun would be waiting for him in Monterrey. Rolf recounted going to Monterrey expecting to receive the firearm. However, no one reached out to him for several days. He then returned to his residence in Mexico City and did not hear from Juan Carlos again until Juan's release from prison. Upon his release, Juan contacted Rolf with updated plans. Now wanted Abril killed in Mexico City since he had managed to lure her there. Due to procedural rules, these cases couldn't be consolidated. Thus, they were divided into separate hearings. The initial trial focused solely on Rodolfo Daniel Bendes, the direct perpetrator, and Juan Carlos Rodriguez. Subsequent trials would involve the other accused parties. In August 2022, the first round of court proceedings commenced. During these sessions, the prosecutor's office presented testimonies from 28 witnesses and 14 pieces of expert evidence. Rolf El Shalon detailed how he planned and executed the murder and once again pleaded guilty. On May 19, 2023, the court found Rodolfo Daniel Bendes and Juan Carlos Rodriguez guilty of committing femicide and sentenced them each to 52 years in prison. Additionally, they were ordered to pay 56,000 Mexican pesos, approximately $30,000 in damages. Following their conviction, they were transferred to a pretrial detention center to begin their sentences. The Abril family publicly announced their intention to appeal Rodolfo's sentence. They considered it too lenient, given his direct involvement in her death. Further complicating matters regarding other defendants. In October 2014, a judge decided to split the trials of 4 defendants: Juan Carlos Maldonado, Juan Baldra, Eli Carnal, Amada Viente Rodriguez, and Garcia Alicia Flores into separate hearings. Prosecutors opposed this decision due to concerns it would prolong the legal process and incur additional costs since each defendant would need to testify multiple times. Abril's tragic fate deeply unsettled not only her family, but also society at large in Mexico. Just when it seemed justice was within reach through these trials, they resumed yet again under distressing circumstances surrounding her demise. According to reconstructed events, after one such court hearing, Abril entered a car with her children and legal counsel en route back home via Monterrey Airport, where an assassin on motorcycle ambushed them at an intersection near their route, opening fire specifically targeting her head, while miraculously sparing most occupants inside, except grazing one's limb incidentally. Despite transporting Abril alive, hospital's efforts ended vainly, succumbing injuries 6 hours arriving tragic incident shockwaves through community. Especially Javier brother, urgent quest resolve misconceptions pervading suspicions, implicate, released prisoner officially. However, authorities declared unknown identity, intent shooter impeded, qualifying categorization femicide, necessary apprehension sought. That's why this case was classified simply as a murder, and the police launched an investigation to gather all necessary evidence to consider it a femicide. Abril's friend took to social media to discuss the situation, accusing Juan Carlos. This accusation led to her account being deleted. Abril's family feared that this man would go unpunished for his actions. They sought public attention through social media as well. Abril passed away on a day commemorating the fight against gender-based violence. Her death took on added significance because of this. The family organized numerous protests and marches in her honor, demanding justice. Social media users began discussing how Abril had expressed her fear many times and how authorities ignored her pleas for help. Amid their grief and frustration, Abril's family and friends held a funeral in Monterrey with a mass at the Bonito Flores Chapel. Dozens came to extend condolences and honor Abril's memory, also demanding justice. The procession moved to the Pantheon Garden in Los Angeles for the burial. Abril's case highlighted issues around gender-based violence, especially those involving judges releasing men who attacked women. Ex-husband Juan Carlos was released after appeals, which allowed him to bring Abril to Mexico City unimpeded, leading to her death. The Mexican General Prosecutor's Office initiated an investigation against judges Carlos Trillo Rodriguez, Federico Mosa Gonzalez, and Hector Jimenez Lopez for enabling Juan Carlos's release from prison. Members of the former president's party also got involved. Andrés Manuel López Obrador urged the removal of Judge Mosca in the Chamber of Deputies due to his involvement in a controversial case where he freed a doctor accused of disrespecting a patient in a public hospital. Charges were downgraded from femicide to sexual violence, leading to his release. During the scandal surrounding Abril's case on November 29th, Rafael Gara, president of Mexico City's Supreme Court, temporarily suspended all judges involved in Juan Carlos's case. Claudia Sheinbaum, head of government for Mexico City, confirmed an investigation into Abril's case as femicide was underway. If proven that Juan Carlos was responsible, judges involved could face consequences. Local and international media reported that despite evidence against him, Juan was released during legal proceedings. The family announced forming the Voice of Abril, a nonprofit aimed at offering information and support for violence victims. Protests over Abril's death pushed for reclassification against Juan Carlos, so he would face attempted murder charges leading potentially to imprisonment. After being charged, Juan posted online that he wished for justice in resolving Abril's crime and expressed willingness to cooperate with police, while stating conflicts with Abril were not fatal, leading community outrage. His daughter Ana Cecilia publicly accused him of years-long physical and mental abuse towards Abril and their children too, sharing photos purportedly showing Abril hospitalized following an attack by him with a baseball bat, according to herself. Her father was a narcissistic sociopath who got out of prison by bribing officials. A few days later, amidst the ongoing investigation and protests, an arrest warrant was issued for Juan Carlos. Not due to the Abril case, but rather for violating judicial duties. He had been released on the condition he'd visit the police station weekly. However, he failed to comply. Additionally, he missed 2 court hearings. Judge Agustin Monreal Gaspar subsequently revoked his release order. During one hearing, the judge read out a letter from Juan claiming he feared for his life and hence avoided attending the hearings. He mentioned that since Abril's death, both he and his family had received threats, believing that appearing in court could lead to someone seeking revenge on him. Nonetheless, the judge did not accept this as a valid excuse and thus issued an arrest warrant. Juan was also barred from leaving the country. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed on, with authorities determined to uncover the entire truth. As part of their efforts, they came across another letter written by Juan, where he again denied any involvement in Abril's death. He asserted he never wished her harm and had no intent to kill her. He narrated his version of events from that night. According to him, they argued and Abril first picked up a knife and stabbed him in the side. He claimed hitting her with a bat was his first act of self-defense and maintained he never attempted to take her life. Naturally, this letter incensed those present at its reading. None found Juan Carlos's words credible. The investigation pointed towards Juan Carlos as the primary suspect in this matter. Furthermore, police identified at least 7 other individuals implicated in the crime against Abril after analyzing surveillance footage from nearby where these events occurred. The videos depicted 2 cars trailing Abril as she departed from the courthouse. Both drivers were communicating with the individual who ultimately fired the fatal shot at Abril's head. Post-attack footage showed all three vehicles speeding away from the scene together. Although identities of those involved were not established at that point, investigators concluded there was strong evidence suggesting Juan Carlos's involvement in orchestrating this crime. Investigators believed that Juan had met these individuals during his time in prison and had compensated one of them to ensure his safety. According to their findings, the people who protected him were released from prison, followed by Juan's release. Subsequently, he allegedly paid them to end Abril's life. Only Juan knew precisely Abril's route to Mexico City because he was the one who requested meeting with her. When this information came to light, no law firm wanted to represent him. Abril's family, friends, and colleagues provided all possible information to the authorities to facilitate his capture. However, a few days later, sources from the country's general prosecutor's office reported that Juan had left Mexico. They indicated that he managed to flee by crossing the border between Mexico and the United States. Mexican authorities promptly contacted Interpol to circulate information about the search for Juan Carlos, and Interpol immediately commenced their search for him. Soon enough, he was wanted by authorities in over 151 countries, determined to locate him at any cost. By late January 2024, there were no new developments in the case. 4 years have passed since Abril's tragic death without any accountability for those responsible for this crime. Her children are now living with her family on the outskirts of Mexico City, clinging to hope that justice will eventually be served. To this day, everyone is asking, where is Juan Carlos? His apprehension remains a top priority for law enforcement agencies. Abril's family has vowed not to cease their fight for justice until he is found and held accountable. The Sharp family lived in Victoria, Australia, a place with peaceful beaches and quiet suburban life. John Sharp, his pregnant wife Anna, and their adorable daughter Gracie seemed a happy family. But this image was soon shattered, leading to one of the most heart-wrenching cases in Australian history. In March 2004, the Sharp family home became a crime scene. Anna Kemp and her daughter Gracie vanished without a trace. Born on February 28, 1967, John Sharp grew up in a world familiar to many of us. A childhood marked by the usual ups and downs, aspirations shaped by the world around him, and the pursuit of happiness supported by his family. Raised in a community where neighbors knew each other by name and children played freely under the sun, John's formative years seemed filled with simple joys. As John transitioned into adolescence, those who knew him observed his evolution from a bright-eyed child into a quiet, somewhat introverted young man. Intelligent and courteous, yet always on the periphery as if watching the world from a distance, John was always there, but somehow apart. Like he was searching for something he couldn't quite find among the people around him. It was during these formative years that John's path began to subtly diverge, laying the groundwork for the man he would become. His silent observations, the unvoiced thoughts simmering beneath a calm exterior, might have been the early signs of an upcoming storm. Anna Kemp, coming from New Zealand, brought with her the promise of new beginnings when she arrived in Australia. Her infectious smile and love of life touched the hearts of those around her, including John Sharp's. They met at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where they both worked. Anna was 4 years John's senior. Laughter shared over coffee and long walks along the beach culminated in their wedding day. Anna's spirit was a stark contrast to John's quiet introspection. Yet their paths were destined to intertwine, igniting a tragic sequence of events. Maybe it was the allure of opposites attracting that drew them together, or perhaps something deeper, a shared longing for connection, for being understood. They married in October 1994 and lived in various places around the Mornington Peninsula area of South Melbourne. The future seemed bright, filled with endless possibilities. But behind the joys of marriage, the initial signs of strain began to emerge. The arrival of a child brings a new dawn for a family. Gracie, born in August 2002, with her innocent eyes and radiant smile, became the center of John and Anna's world. Yet the joy of parenthood also brought new challenges, casting long shadows on their peaceful family life. Every home holds its secrets, its private sorrows and silent battles. For John and Anna, the dream of a happy family life in the suburbs of the Mornington Peninsula soon faced trials that tested their bond. Gracie was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, requiring a corrective orthopedic harness and causing her endless discomfort. Her early months were marked by relentless crying and sleepless nights, a situation that tested her parents to their limits. Once the harness was removed, problems with eating began, and her sleep issues persisted. Anna sought professional help for these challenges. The family relocated one last time to a residence on Prince Street in Mornington, a quiet coastal town about 35 miles south of Melbourne. This place would tragically become the final setting for Anna and Gracie. In November 2003, Anna became pregnant with their second child. Gracie was just 15 months old. Anna was very excited. She was a loving mother, and Gracie was what she was living for. She'd always wanted more than one child because she never wanted her daughter to be on her own, so that when she and her husband were no longer there, Gracie would have somebody. The facade of family harmony lasted until March 21, 2004, at a nephew's birthday celebration, the last time when Anna was seen alive. Guests saw no signs of discord between Anna and her caring husband John. The next day, Anna dropped Gracie off at daycare and arranged to catch up with a friend. Her final contact with someone outside her marriage occurred the day after, during a call to her private health insurance company, where she discussed extending their health cover to include their expected child. Then John called Anna's friends to tell them she had left with another man and had left Gracie with him. He reached out to Anna's mother, claiming she had abandoned him for another man, and he was unaware of her whereabouts, though he anticipated she would return for their daughter within the week. He kept bringing Gracie to her daycare, telling the staff that he and his wife had parted ways, which meant Gracie wouldn't be coming back to the daycare. Anna's family received emails from Anna, and her mother received a bouquet of flowers from her daughter, but no phone call. The initial shock and confusion of Anna's friends and family quickly turned to worry. How could a devoted mother and her child simply disappear without a word? By May 2004, Sharp, engaging with the media, painted a picture of a man tormented by his family's disappearance. He said to the local paper, "Anyone that knows me knows I gave 100% for my daughter and my marriage." In a public plea, Sharp, holding a photo of Gracie, professed enduring love for Anna, saying, "Anna, our marriage may be over, but I still love you, and you are the mother of our beautiful daughter Gracie, whom we both adore more than anyone else." He claimed he had spoken to Anna a week earlier and that she had left him for another man. He asked anyone with information to come forward. He said, "My biggest fear is being denied a part of Gracie's future." His demeanor and statements, however, seemed odd and struck a discordant note, inviting scrutiny over his narrative's authenticity. Despite proclaiming their marital dissolution, an inconsistency highlighted by his premature use of the past tense when speaking about his family, a detail that did not escape police notice. Behind the scenes, law enforcement began to peel back the layers of John Sharp's carefully constructed narrative. Each unanswered question pointed to a darker reality. What secrets lay buried within the Sharp family? Anna and her mother used to call each other every couple of days. When Anna missed several of her calls, she grew concerned. She called Sharp, who justified Anna's absence with weak explanations like being busy taking Gracie to daycare. This made her even more worried. Anna's devout Catholic beliefs and her unlikely affair and abandonment, initially without Gracie and at 20 weeks pregnant, fueled her family's distrust toward Sharp's account, further aggravated by the impersonal email and gift without any phone contact. Upon Anna's continued absence, her mother alerted the police in New Zealand and reported her daughter missing, prompting communication with the Mornington authorities. Confronted by the police, Sharp told them Anna got into a blue car and relocated to Chelsea with their daughter, denying any knowledge or involvement into their disappearance. The search for Anna and Gracie commenced with urgency. Missing Persons Officer Norelle Fraser said detectives had to keep an open mind and not assume the mother and daughter were dead, as they had only been reported missing. She said Anna's bank account had been used intermittently, and her phone was used once or twice. "We kept thinking, is she alive?" But as days passed, hope began to fade, replaced by a gnawing realization that the answers they sought might reveal a truth too painful to bear. Sharp quickly became the main suspect since there was no evidence to support his statement. The investigation's pace quickened as new information surfaced. Friends and acquaintances came forward, their testimonies shedding light on the growing tensions behind the closed doors of the Sharps' home. One of the friends confessed. She mentioned they were going through a tough time. "I never imagined it could lead to this." The investigators increased pressure on Sharp, trying to make him nervous so that he would make a mistake. He lived like a recluse and never had guests. Their family home was ominously quiet. John was followed by undercover officers to monitor his movements. Soon, there was a breakthrough in the case. To mislead investigators, Sharp periodically utilized Emma's phone and bank card, crafting an illusion of her active presence across the southeast suburbs of Victoria. However, this charade crumbled under police surveillance, capturing Sharp's attempts to conceal evidence. The surveillance caught him on camera driving to Chelsea Beach and pulling a white plastic bag from the bush next to the public toilet. He took out Emma's phone from the bag and made a call. Then he withdrew some cash from the nearest ATM. After that, he disposed of the bag with the phone and card by putting them into a trash can in Mount Martha. He then drove home and called the missing persons unit, telling them that his wife had just called him and withdrawn cash from their joint account. But the team already knew exactly what had happened. The evidence was irrefutable, pointing to a conclusion that was unthinkable. Not having enough evidence to charge Sharp with murders and being unable to determine his motive, the investigators hoped that he could lead them to the bodies. But as days passed with no action from Sharp, the decision to arrest him was made. On June 10th, Sharp faced another round of questioning by the authorities. He persisted that Anna had willingly departed on March 23rd. However, the investigators remained skeptical, noting his emotional detachment regarding his wife's supposed affair and subsequent departure with their daughter. Discrepancies in Sharp's timeline emerge. The man who claimed ignorance now appears as a master of evasion. Narelle Fraser said about Sharp, "I don't think anybody would know how John felt about anything. He was a closed book. He was very insular. He was a loner. He didn't show any emotion. He showed no personality." The investigators thought of another way to get his confession. They invited his parents and showed them the footage of John on Chelsea Beach, and then asked them to talk to their son. It is the presentation of an undeniable piece of evidence that marks the turning point in the investigation. An hour after his parents left, John began to talk as he realized the inevitability of his situation. His final barriers of denial and self-preservation eroded, revealing the truth of his psyche, a man ensnared by his own darkest impulses. What turned his heart so cold that he became a stranger even to those who thought they knew him best? Sometimes the greatest dangers lurk in the places we expect the least. Sharp's confession laid bare the reality of what transpired within the walls of the Sharp home. He told police he had fantasies of murdering his wife for several months before ultimately killing her. Adjusting to life with a baby, sleepless nights, financial pressures, and the routine of daily life added layers of complexity, pushing the family to a breaking point. Sharp explained that he killed Anna because she was controlling and moody and was getting on his nerves. Their marriage was unhappy. Sharp perceived his wife's assertive personality as undermining his masculinity. He stated Anna used to wear the pants in the family. Sharp told the investigators that Anna's pregnancy was a surprise to him. He didn't want another child and viewed the new pregnancy as an additional burden, harboring resentment towards Anna and their unborn child in silence, instead of voicing his concerns. He even questioned if it was his child at all. John was self-employed as a conveyancer. The financial responsibility of a growing family overwhelmed him. He seemed withdrawn. Anna was trying to bridge the growing distance between them. But as she reached out, John's retreat into himself became more pronounced. With each passing day, John became more distant, a prisoner of his own mind, ensnared by thoughts he could not share and feelings he could not express. Anna fought to keep her family together, unaware of the darkness taking hold of her husband's heart. The chasm between John, isolated in his thoughts, and Anna, attending to the needs of their home and children, widened, filled with unsaid words and unacknowledged fears. Anna found herself facing a wall of silence, her efforts met with indifference, or worse, hostility. Sharp made an unexpected and ominous purchase in early 2003, a high-powered spear gun from a Sport Philip Marine in Mornington, an interest he had never before expressed. This marked the beginning of a dark and tragic chapter. Sharp dedicated countless hours to mastering the spear gun in their backyard, familiarizing himself with its mechanics. In the days that followed, a domestic dispute escalated into an unimaginable horror. Gerald Kemp, Anna's brother, told reporters that in February 2004, Anna had an ultrasound to determine their baby's gender, but Sharp did not even bother going to the doctor's appointment with her. Upon her return, she anticipated her husband's eagerness to learn about the baby's gender, only to find he showed no interest and didn't even ask her. Distressed by his apathy, Anna confronted Sharp, warning him that if he continued to be indifferent to their daughter and the unborn child, she was going to leave him. They went to bed at around 9 or 10 p.m. Anna quickly fell asleep, while John stayed awake, consumed by their argument and the overall dissatisfaction with their marriage. Eventually, he stepped out to the backyard garage, retrieving the spear gun that he didn't use outside of his target practice sessions. In a chilling sequence of events, Sharp crept back into the room where Anna was sleeping peacefully, coldly aiming a charged spear gun at her while their 20-month-old daughter lay asleep in her bed. The first shot did not end her life as she was still breathing, and with a grim resolve, he reloaded and fired again, this time fatally wounding Anna and the unborn child she carried. Afterward, he covered her with towels and retreated to sleep the rest of the night on the sofa downstairs. The next morning, Sharp tried to remove the spears, but managed to remove only the shafts. Completing this grim task, he then dropped off Gracie at her daycare, later turning away a TV antenna technician booked by Anna with the excuse of Anna's absence, her body still in the bedroom. Under the cover of night, he buried Anna in a hastily dug shallow grave in the garden. Officer Fraser said, "It's almost difficult to describe, but to hear a man talk about murdering his wife who was 3 months pregnant, that was hard enough, but he said it with no emotion whatsoever." She compared his confession to saying what he'd had for breakfast that morning. In the days that followed, Sharp took Gracie and revisited the marine supply store for another spear. He said, "I was thinking of taking care of Gracie by myself, and just amongst all this madness, that's when I lost the plot." When asked why he killed Gracie, he said, "I don't really know," and called it irrational madness. Sharp told the police, "You know what you're doing is sort of insane, but there's just this weird part of you that's almost unstoppable or something. You're almost like on automatic pilot sort of thing. I can't really remember much of what I thought of anything, just apart from the sort of crazy sensation. It was totally emotional." He said that for the next 4 days, voices in his head debated Gracie's fate. A few days after the murder, he started thinking Gracie needed to be with her mum. "It was sort of in and out of my head all week. I could hear things going through my head, the voices saying, 'You can't do it, you can do it, you've got to do it.' Every option was coming up." On March 27th, after putting Gracie into her cot, Sharp drank a few glasses of whiskey and cola, confessing that he did this to numb his senses for what he was about to do. Then he went to the garage. Armed once again with the spear gun, he inflicted unimaginable terror on Gracie, who endured multiple shots before her tragic death at her father's hands. Same as Anna, Gracie didn't die at once. After the 4th shot, she was dead. The next morning, Sharp returned to Gracie's bedroom. He could not bear looking at her, so he had to hold a towel in front of his face. Then he removed the bolts. Concluding his macabre errands, Sharp acquired a chainsaw at a local Bunnings Warehouse hardware store in Frankston. He unearthed Anna's remains from their garden. He then disposed of Anna's and Gracie's bodies in garbage bags at the Mornington Refuse Transfer Station. He also discarded the spear gun, the chainsaw, and Gracie's clothes and toys. "I have a bootload of hard waste," he told the attendant. Officer Fraser said, "This is his wife that's pregnant. I kept thinking what was coming next. And then he told us about little Gracie. It's the most difficult interview I have ever listened to. I remember at one stage, there was a break in the interview. I went to the ladies' toilets, and I just put my head in my hands. I couldn't listen." Sharp then called Anna's friends and family with a fabricated story of her affair. Her friends said that immediately, alarm bells rang, and her hairs on the back of her neck stood up because there was no way Anna would leave Gracie behind. Following the murder of his daughter, he made a second call to his mother-in-law, telling her that Gracie was now with Anna in a bigger and better place. At his residence, Sharp crafted an email from Anna to her family in New Zealand to convince them she was fine. The messages didn't sound like her daughter had written them. Sharp used Anna's email account to contact her brother as well. In the email, he claimed she had departed with another man with whom she was expecting a child. One of the emails read, "Please respect and understand my wish for privacy and take comfort in the fact that I'm about to enjoy life like I have never before." This act only intensified the mystery surrounding Anna's prolonged silence. The family filed a missing person report on Anna. The interview uncovered that he had jotted down notes for his cover story. While analyzing Sharp's TV appearances, body language expert Dr. Cliff Lamsley said that this was a poor attempt at portraying concern and sadness. He was juggling his eyebrows, contorting his face, and using a tissue as a prop, though there was no moisture on his nose, no tears on his face. It's a convincing tactic that we rarely see with truth-tellers. The family told the police some disturbing facts. They believed Sharp's motive for murdering Anna was her discovery of Gracie's abuse by her husband. Although there was no evidence to support this theory, Sharp had a history of abusing the children of family and friends. Anna didn't know this before marrying him. One relative said, "We reckon she caught him. We think that's why he killed her." When one of Sharp's former victims became an adult, she confronted him about the abuse. In response, Sharp called her a derogatory name and told her she deserved it. The victim was tormented by the thought that reporting it earlier could have prevented the murders. Anna's brother later said that after the couple's honeymoon, she told her mother about their marriage. "I think I've made a mistake." Her brother remarked, "She just carried on with the mistake." She said there was no passion or love. Nevertheless, the couple continued their life together. An exhaustive 3-week search at a landfill in Mornington eventually led to the discovery of both Anna and Gracie's remains. Narelle Fraser was a member of Victoria Police for almost 30 years. One case she will never forget is the Mornington Monster. During the search, she spotted a blue bag. She opened it, but saw a kitchen glove. So the search continued. However, she had a gut feeling that something was wrong. So she returned to the bag. She then realized that the glove was not what it seemed. She said, "It's funny, but I knew I'd find Anna. Just an innate feeling I can't describe any better than that. And when I did find her, I couldn't leave her. I sat with the bag, waiting for crime scene to arrive. I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone in the tip without anyone with her. I've thought about it since, and I know it sounds bizarre, but I almost feel like Anna was reaching out to me. I was determined to make sure that Anna wouldn't end her life in this tip. I just knew I would find her, and I did." Soon she realized that Gracie must be close by. "I put my head in my hands, and I just cried. I cried for what Anna had endured, for Anna's family, for humanity as a whole, I suppose." They were laid to rest at Green Park Cemetery in New Zealand, with Anna's maiden name, Kemp, marking their final resting place. The memorial also bears the name of Anna's unborn son, Francis. During the trial, the attorney aimed to shed light on John Sharp's psyche, his mental anguish that preceded the tragic events. Through the defense's lens, Sharp's life was depicted as being full of mounting pressures, financial strain, marital discord, and a crippling sense of entrapment. The sentencing judge said the events of the crime were too awful to contemplate and singular in its barbarity. He stated that Sharp had murdered his daughter simply so that his first crime would not be discovered, which was unspeakably callous. Forensic psychologist Carrie Dane said, "John Sharp was a quiet man, a shy man. Another way of looking at this was that he was actually quite socially inept. He didn't have much in the way of communication skills. He didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence." Psychiatrist Dr. Lester Walton had described Sharp as dependent, passive, and a retiring individual who was unable or reluctant to confront problems. Sharp believed the only way of solving his marriage difficulties was to kill his wife. The Mornington Monster pleaded guilty to the murders committed against both Anna and Gracie, receiving 2 consecutive terms of life imprisonment for each, without eligibility for parole before 33 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2037. Sharp wept like a baby on hearing the verdict. He is kept under protective custody while serving his sentence, as he faces life threats from other inmates. Sharp's elderly parents said John's crimes were horrific. He has given himself a life sentence for what he has done, and he will live with this for the rest of his life. One of Sharp's nieces said that his crimes have stolen 3 beautiful and precious lives. Sharp's crime is considered Victoria's worst case of familicide. Investigator Shane Brundell said, "It's a healing process for us as much as anyone else, and with the passage of time that gets a little easier. But it certainly makes you appreciate your own circumstances, your own family, and cherish every moment that you have with them, knowing that there's people out there that resort to these sorts of means to eradicate their own families." just makes you know how special and important your own families are. I'd love to read your comments on the case. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay in touch.